Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little wild. You're going to ancient Egypt, not the romanticised, glimmering Cleopatra-era Egypt you might be picturing, but the real thing with the heat, the grime, the divine drama, and the very real possibility of dying from a stubbed toe. You're about to get dropped into one of the most iconic civilizations in human history, and honestly, you probably won't survive the day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, what city are you in and what time is it right now? I want to know where you're tuning in from for this little time travel experiment. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your feet hit the ground first. Sand. Of course it's sand. Sand is going to be your best friend and worst enemy from here on out. It crunches underfoot, seeps into your shoes. Or if you're like most people here, you're barefoot and it's just lodging itself under your toenails. The heat slaps you immediately, like walking into an oven that's already angry at you. It's not just summer hot, it's Sahara-level relentless. The sun is a vengeful god and you, little mortal, have entered its sacred domain with no sunscreen and zero SPF faith. Around you the Nile Valley stretches wide, ribbons of dusty green along the river, but beyond that, bleached desert. You squint toward the horizon and the heat shimmers so intensely it looks like the air is trying to boil. You're already sweating, and it's barely breakfast time. You notice locals walking by with calm ease. They're all used to this. Their skin is darker, their posture relaxed under the weight of baskets or jars balanced on heads, and they're eyeing you like you're one bad decision away from a fainting spell. They're not wrong. What hits next is the smell. It's a wild cocktail of life, earth, dung, smoke, and something sweet, possibly honey or just rotting fruit. The Nile gives, but it also stinks. And there are flies. Oh wow, the flies. They're in your ears, your eyes, your mouth if you open it. You swat uselessly, but they're unbothered. They've been here longer than you, and they have no intention of leaving. You wander past some modest mud brick houses, small, packed together, their walls sun-baked into permanence. You can't help but notice how low the ceilings are, how little privacy anyone seems to have. The heat radiates off every surface. You duck into the shadow of one and it offers maybe 2 degrees of relief. You're already drenched in sweat and craving cold water. But joke's on you, because clean drinking water isn't exactly on tap. You could drink from the Nile and maybe become best friends with dysentery, schistosomiasis, or one of several parasites that lay eggs inside your organs. Fun. You think about asking someone for help, but then remember, you don't speak ancient Egyptian at all, not even a single word. This isn't just a language barrier, it's like trying to communicate through interpretive dance with someone who doesn't know what dancing is. The locals glance at you, puzzled and probably a little amused. You open your mouth, hoping English might magically work. It doesn't. A child stares at you. A man mutters something that sounds mildly concerned. You manage an awkward wave and walk on like you're not mentally Googling how to say where's the nearest hospital in hieroglyphs. Your body is not built for this. Not yet. You haven't had time to adjust. You're dehydrated within the first hour, your lips crack, you feel dizzy, and the sun just keeps climbing. No sunglasses, no hats, unless you steal someone's reed headdress, which, let's be honest, wouldn't go over well. You duck under an awning where a vendor is selling dried fish. The smell hits you like a brick wall wrapped in seaweed. It's pungent, but it's food. You realise you're hungry, but also worried that eating might make your stomach betray you later. Still, there's something beautiful about it all. The sheer resilience. People are busy everywhere, hauling grain, weaving baskets, feeding goats. It's chaotic but organised, like an autumnal orchestra of survival. And the colours? The dyes are faded from sun and time, but they're still vibrant in their way. Ochres, indigo, bits of green from malachite. Someone walks by with a jar of something thick and fragrant, probably perfume made from myrrh or tree resin. You catch a whiff and it actually helps mask the background funk of humanity. Now here's your first historical curveball. This might not be the Egypt you imagined. Most people think of pyramids and Tutankhamun, but this civilization lasted over 3,000 years. You might have landed during the Old Kingdom, or the Middle, or some weird interim where the government's unstable, invaders are nearby and grain taxes are higher than your stress levels. Historians still argue over how stable Egypt truly was from era to era. It wasn't all gold masks and camel rides. Political infighting, famines and Nile floods could turn a good year into a disaster. And here comes the first quirky fact of the night. You're probably wearing eyeliner right now, or at least someone's trying to apply it to your sweaty, confused face. Why? Because in ancient Egypt, both men and women wore kohl, not just for beauty, but for practical reasons. It helped reduce glare from the sun and supposedly warded off evil spirits and eye infections. It's basically ancient SPF meets holy Vaseline. If you're lucky, they'll use lead-free ingredients. If not, well, hope you didn't want to see past age 30. You find yourself walking toward the river's edge again, just hoping for some breeze. The breeze comes, but with it, a wave of dust and sand that slams into your face, sticks to your wet skin, and grinds between your teeth. You cough. You wipe your eyes, and just then a man walks past carrying a cage of live ducks on his head. None of them seem particularly concerned about you. Even the ducks look like they know you're not going to last long here. This is just the beginning. The sun is still rising. You're not even halfway through your first day, and your body is already plotting betrayal. Welcome to ancient Egypt. You're going to suffer beautifully. You think breakfast might fix this, that maybe a little food will give you the will to carry on, or at least help you forget that every pore of your body feels like it's being used as a grain silo. So you wander toward the sound of morning routines, voices raised, animals clucking, pots clattering, and you follow your nose, which is a brave move given the circumstances. There's no Starbucks, no corner cafe. What you get is more rustic. In the alley between two homes, there's a woman pounding something in a large clay bowl with a wooden pestle. It's rhythmic, heavy, and vaguely musical. She's making bread, sort of. This isn't your warm, fluffy sourdough with crusty edges and soft insides. It's a flat, heavy thing, dark in colour, dense as a brick, and full of surprise ingredients, like sand. No, seriously. Sand ends up in everything. The grinding stones they use to prepare flour also grind themselves down just a little each day, and over time that means every bite of bread contains trace amounts of stone. Over years it ruins your teeth, but for now you're just hungry enough to ignore the possible dental future you've signed up for. You get handed a chunk. It's warm, which is nice. It smells earthy, a little fermented. You take a bite, and your molars immediately regret it. It's gritty, chewy, and vaguely sour. Think Peter that got left in a cave for 2 days and rolled through a beach. Then comes the drink. Someone hands you a cup filled with cloudy brownish liquid, foaming slightly at the top. It's beer. Technically. It's warm and unfiltered, full of bits of grain still floating around in it, and low in alcohol but high in nutrition, or at least calories. It's basically liquid bread. It's what everyone drinks, even kids, because it's safer than the river water. You sip it and it's weirdly thick, almost like someone blended oatmeal and forgot to refrigerate it. Your stomach makes a noise somewhere between warning and resignation. This is your breakfast, bread and beer, every day, sometimes dates if you're lucky, maybe a little goat cheese or lentils if the harvest's been good. But most days, carbs and carbs, with a side of carb. Ancient Egyptians believed in eating to fuel the body for work and the soul for the afterlife. But there's not much here about taste or variety. If you came here dreaming of spice markets and elaborate feasts, sorry, you're not Cleopatra. You're one of thousands of regular folk trying to get enough calories to make it through another sunblasted day. And here's your historical fact for the morning. Ancient Egyptian beer was so central to life that workers were literally paid in it. Pyramid builders, no, not slaves, but paid labourers, were given daily rations of bread, onions and beer. It was their paycheck, and it kept them going. Not exactly a protein shake, but you work with what you've got. The woman making the bread notices your hesitation and says something in a kind tone, but it's impossible to decipher. Still, the vibe is friendly. You nod, mouthful of rock flour, and raise your mug of beige beer in thanks. She chuckles. Maybe she understands. Or maybe she's laughing because she knows what's about to happen to your digestive system. You wander away, chewing slowly, when you catch sight of a kid balancing a stack of papyrus scrolls on his head. He's running, probably a messenger of some kind, and clearly late. You step aside to let him pass, and your bare feet hit something sharp. It's a fragment of pottery, sun-baked and jagged. You yelp, because of course you do, and now you've got your first souvenir, a little cup that's probably going to get infected by lunchtime. You look down at the injury and realise your feet are already stained brown from dirt and blood and who knows what else. No one else seems to notice, or care. You glance around at the others, most are barefoot too. Shoes exist technically, but most people don't wear them, unless they're rich or trying to impress someone. Sandals are made from leather or woven papyrus, but they're not great at keeping your feet safe from debris or bugs or heat. The streets aren't paved, they're just dirt, and everything gets dumped here. Animal waste, fish bones, broken tools, it's a mess. You try to keep walking, but now you're limping, which draws more stares. You pretend you're totally fine and head toward a shaded courtyard where a group of men are eating. It smells slightly better here, roasted onions, something gammon savoury. But again, no one offers you a menu, you're not part of this scene. And you're realising quickly that being an outsider here isn't just inconvenient. It's dangerous. People don't trust you. You don't speak the language. You don't know the customs. You're dressed weird. And you look like you're about 10 minutes from passing out. You lean against a mud brick wall, trying to catch your breath. Someone walks past and mutters a word that sounds suspiciously like an insult. You don't blame them. You are the embodiment of not from around here, and every breath you take confirms it. Here's your fringe fact for this meal break. In some periods, Egyptians also made a version of beer bread, where the dough was partially fermented, then baked, then soaked in water to release the sugars and start the brewing process. So yes, your breakfast and your buzz came from the same lump of dough. Multitasking, ancient style. You slump into a crouch and stare into the dust. You're full, sort of, but not satisfied. Your stomach is unsettled. You're sweating even in the shade. And your foot is bleeding again. A kid passes by gnawing on what looks like a dried fishtail. He offers you a bite. You politely decline. He shrugs and keeps walking. You envy his resilience. And that's when the wave of fatigue hits. It's not even mid-morning, but your body feels like it's run a marathon and then got hit by a chariot. You consider lying down, but then remember where you are. Dirt, flies, possibly scorpions, no thanks. Somewhere in the distance a flute plays. It's a thin, haunting sound that echoes down the alleyways. It's the only beautiful thing you've encountered all morning that hasn't tried to kill your intestines. You close your eyes just for a second. The bread's still stuck between your teeth. The beer is sloshing in your gut like it's planning a rebellion. And the sun is climbing higher, promising more heat, more pain, and more sand in places sand was never meant to go. This is breakfast in ancient Egypt. You're already exhausted. And there are still 16 hours left in the day. You shuffle towards the Nile. Seems like a good idea, the way a mirage seems like a good idea. Maybe you'll splash some water on your face. Maybe you'll wash off this ancient pancake of sweat and sand that's forming a second skin on your body. You know better than to drink it, but hey, what's a little rinse? Famous last thoughts. The river glistens like a strip of melted silver, wide and slow-moving. It breathes life into the valley shore, but it also carries death in many forms. You reach the banks and instantly feel the temperature drop just a bit. There's a breeze here, not a generous one, more like a lazy sigh, but it's enough to make you lean in closer. You kneel, cup your hands and splash your face. For a glorious 3 seconds it feels like heaven, and then something moves in the water. You freeze. Was that a log? No, not with eyes. That's a crocodile, a big one. Its back barely breaks the surface, but you can see the ridged outline as it glides along the shoreline like it owns the place. Because it does. You're the guest. A delicious, slow-moving guest. You back away very carefully, trying not to splash or trip on the sea of slick mud at the river's edge. Locals nearby don't even react. A few children are playing not far from you, wading ankle-deep in the water and throwing what looks like fruit rinds at each other. One of them notices your alarm and giggles. This isn't new to them. They know where to walk, when to run, and what noises mean you have 5 seconds to live. You don't. You are a breath away from becoming Reptile Brunch, and now you're rethinking every nature documentary you've ever seen. Now's a good time for your historical fact. The Nile crocodile has been feared and worshipped for millennia. The ancient Egyptians respected its lethal power so much they turned it into a god. Sobek. Sobek was the deity of strength, protection and fertility, often depicted with the head of a crocodile and a nasty smile. He was both destroyer and guardian, your typical ancient paradox. In fact, there were entire temples built in his honour. Some Egyptians even kept crocodiles as sacred animals, pampered in pools and mummified after death. Meanwhile, regular folks lived in constant low-level fear of being snatched off the riverbank. you decide not to test the boundaries of reverence and stupidity today. Wiping your dripping face on the edge of your tunic, which is now equal parts sweat rag and fashion disaster, you stumble back from the bank and take a new look at the river. It's majestic, sure, but it's also full of microscopic horrors. The Nile is the bloodstream of Egypt, yes, but imagine if your bloodstream had worms. Schistosomiasis, for example, is a parasite that enters through bare skin and proceeds to make your internal organs its personal Airbnb. You don't see it coming, and then suddenly you're very sick, very itchy, and possibly peeing blood. Ancient Egyptians didn't know the biology, but they knew the risks. Some avoided the water altogether. Others performed purification rituals and made offerings to keep river spirits happy. You, meanwhile, just dunked your face in it. Bold move, you retreat to a nearby cluster of reeds and sit down, carefully avoiding anything that might sting or bite. It's quieter here. You can hear birds, ibises maybe, a kind of croaking call echoing over the water. A few fishermen are waist-deep in the current, casting nets with practiced, graceful movements. Their bodies are lean, sinewy and dark from decades under the sun. They barely glance your way, too focused on the morning's catch to care about the weirdly pale, sunburned tourist having a slow breakdown under a tree. And here comes your fringe fact. Some fishermen use trained otters. Yes, otters. It's not well documented and debated among scholars, but there are hints, scrolls, carvings, vague references that suggest otters might have helped herd fish into nets. Whether it's real or legend, you can't stop picturing it. Ancient Egyptians casually whistling to their adorable murder weasels as they help stock the dinner table. Otters, in tiny harnesses, doing God's work. Speaking of work, you notice someone not far from you hauling a basket of freshly caught fish onto the shore. He's barefoot, of course, and covered in river slime. The smell hits you before you even get close, sharp, salty and slightly spoiled, clings to your nose hairs like a rude guest who doesn't want to leave. The man guts the fish right there on the bank with a sharp shard of flint, tossing the insides back into the water. You watch as tiny eels slither in to claim the feast. The man looks up at you and holds out a fish like he's offering you a gift. You're not sure if it's food, friendship or a joke. Either way, you accept it. It's wet, it's cold, and it's looking at you with the same expression you had when you saw the crocodile. You nod politely, set the fish down like it's a baby you don't want to drop, and back away. You realise that time is passing strangely here. There's no clock tower, no phone, no gentle ping from your smartwatch telling you to hydrate or breathe or stand. The sun is your only real tracker, and it's now approaching its worst position, directly above. Noon in ancient Egypt doesn't come quietly. It arrives like a dragon, breathing pure flame. The shade you'd found is starting to shrink, and the air feels like it's being microwaved. You'd give anything for a cold shower, but all you have is a fish-scented tunic and mild panic. You wipe your forehead again and stare at the slow churn of the Nile. It's beautiful in a cruel, disinterested way. It doesn't care if you're a farmer, a priest, or a tourist with an overconfidence problem. It just flows, and with it flows life and disease and mystery and death. Everything, all at once. And here's your scholarly debate of the day. How exactly did ancient Egyptians manage the risk of these river-based threats, while relying on the Nile so completely? Some believe there was a deeper, widespread understanding of natural cycles and seasons, a kind of folk science. Others argue that ritual and religion filled in the gaps, making people feel safer without actual safety. And some scholars, they say people just coped, got sick, died, and were replaced by more people who got sick and died. You stand up again, sore and slightly dizzy. You're not used to crouching on uneven ground for this long. Every joint in your body creaks. You take one last look at the Nile and whisper a little thank you prayer to Sobek for not dragging you in today. And then, naturally, you step in dung. You look down, human, animal. Honestly, you don't want to know. The Nile may be sacred, but the road home is just gross. So you've stepped in something unspeakable. Let's just all agree not to identify it too closely. There's no point in reliving the details. And besides, ancient Egypt has more than enough sensory experiences waiting to ruin your day. You scrape your foot against a rock, then against some dry grass, then finally just surrender and squish forward, because that's the kind of morning it's been. The Nile gave you sweat, parasites, and a potential reptilian mauling. Surely now you think things must improve. They don't. You need a bathroom, except, spoiler alert, there are no bathrooms. At least not in the way your soft modern brain might hope. You glance around for any kind of sign or structure. A door, a symbol, a blessed outhouse. Nothing, just more baked mud walls, more heat waves, and more people who absolutely aren't panicking about where to pee. Because they've got a system. You, however, are still working that part out. You sneak off behind a small storage shed, hoping for privacy. And here's the thing about ancient Egypt. Privacy is a luxury reserved for death. You crouch in the shadow of a crumbling brick wall trying to stay out of sight. But the second you begin to relax, bam, a goat appears, just stares at you, judging, probably planning to eat part of your tunic. You mutter apologies to the goat, the gods, and the dirt beneath you, and finish your impromptu bathroom break with a sense of shame so deep you might carry it into the afterlife. If you're lucky, someone will come by later and sweep the area clean. Ancient Egyptian cities did have sanitation systems, sort of. In wealthier homes, there were even crude toilet seats, flat stones with a hole often placed above a pot filled with sand or ash. But for most people, nature was the option. And communal spots? Oh, they existed. Long narrow benches with holes shared among family members or workers. That's right, public toilets. As in, at the same time. You sit, you go, you make awkward eye contact. Romantic, right? You shuffle back into the sunlight, relieved in one way but now desperately needing to wash your hands. There's no soap. Soap isn't really a thing yet. Ash and clay and oil mixtures are used, sometimes natron, a kind of natural salt, but good luck finding it unless you're already wealthy or have access to temple supplies. You make do with rubbing your hands against dry reeds and wiping them on your tunic. Cleanish. You move along, joining a small crowd that's gathering in the village centre. Something's going on. People are fanning themselves, shouting, laughing. You squeeze in, and someone finally notices you. Not with curiosity this time, but suspicion. You've got the look of someone who doesn't know the rules. And they're not wrong. In the centre of the commotion is a donkey. A very unhappy donkey. It's tied to a post, surrounded by baskets of figs, onions, and garlic. A young woman is arguing with an older man, and from the tone of it, someone shorted someone else on a trade. This isn't just gossip fodder, it's public drama, ancient Egyptian style. Disputes like this often played out in the open, with either the community gathering to witness, weigh in, or just enjoy the spectacle. You, being unfamiliar, get a few more pointed stares. You're still an outsider here, and the way you're sweating through your clothes and wincing at every fly isn't helping your image. Here's your historical nugget. Ancient Egypt had laws. Not quite our idea of a legal code, but a system of rules and judgments centered on ma'at, the concept of truth, balance, and justice. Disputes were settled in local courts, often presided over by officials or scribes who kept records. And in smaller towns, it was common for respected elders or priests to act as mediators. But there weren't any defense attorneys or jury boxes. If you messed up, your fate depended largely on your status, your reputation, and how convincingly you could tell your side. You decide it's probably best not to stick around, just in case someone decides the real crime here is your terrible sandals or strange accent. As you walk away, you pass what must be a residential area. Rows of modest homes, some single room, others slightly larger, with open courtyards. People live close together, walls are thin, voices carry. You hear snippets of arguments, lullabies, someone singing while grinding grain. The rhythm of life here isn't quiet. It pulses all around you, raw and constant. You peek into one of the doorways. There's a raised sleeping platform made of packed earth, with a reed mat on top and not much else. A jug of water rests near the doorway, covered in a bit of linen to keep the bugs out. A pot is cooking over a small fire pit, and the air smells faintly of lentils and smoke. There's no privacy here either. People live communally, generations sharing the same space. You step back quickly, not wanting to intrude. Now comes your fringe fact. Some wealthier households had what historians call toilet gods. No, seriously, little household deities, often represented by odd-looking amulets or carvings, were placed in or near bathrooms to ward off evil spirits and protect the, vulnerable process of elimination. You might pray to a god like Bess, a dwarf-like protector with a lion's face and a big personality, to make sure nothing unpleasant happened while you were going about your business. Let's talk about smells for a moment, because it's one of those things no documentary ever truly captures. Ancient Egypt stinks, not all the time, not everywhere, but often, and in layers. You've got sweat, dung, fish, smoke, fermenting grain, burning oil, and the metallic tang of blood from freshly butchered animals. Then toss in perfumes, yes, real ones, sometimes exquisite and they're made from myrrh or cinnamon or lotus. People tried, they tried hard, but you can't perfume your way out of sewage and dust. You duck into a narrow alley, hoping to escape the heat and noise, and nearly trip over a basket filled with fruit. It's half-rotted dates. The smell punches you in the face like warm syrup that turned evil. A cat darts out from behind it and hisses at you before vanishing into the shade. That's another thing. Cats are everywhere. Revered, semi-domesticated, and smug as always. You'll learn soon enough that harming a cat here could literally get you executed. Priorities. You reach the end of the alley, and the heat hits you again like a furnace door opening. The sun is merciless now. Shadows are shrinking, and the ground radiates warmth back up at you like it's trying to cook your internal organs from the feet up. You squint at the horizon and realise you've got no idea where you are. You've been wandering, maybe in circles, maybe deeper into a neighbourhood you don't belong in. And here's your scholarly debate to chew on while you panic. Some historians argue that sanitation in ancient Egypt was surprisingly advanced for its time. Others say that while the elite had access to basic hygiene tools, the average person lived in conditions that would make a medieval peasant feel smug. Clay pipes, drainage systems, even basic sewer pits did exist, but not widely, not evenly, and rarely outside cities or palaces. The rest? Left to dry in the sun and hope for the best. You take a deep breath, regret it, and realise that no matter how you slice it, being in ancient Egypt is messy. It's beautiful, layered, sacred, but also utterly unsparing. Your need for a bathroom turned into a goat showdown, and a first-hand education in just how little of your modern comfort survives in this place. You're learning, though, slowly, uncomfortably, and probably with a mild parasite already working its way through your system. You hear it before you see it. A low, eerie whistle cutting through the midday buzz, then a dull roar that builds like distant thunder. The chatter of the villagers shifts. People stop mid-sentence. Someone yells in a tone that doesn't need translation. Heads turn, doors slam, even the cats scramble for cover. You don't know what's happening, but every instinct screams run. And then the wind hits. Not the playful kind that flutters leaves or cools sweat. This is different. It arrives in a rush, dry and gritty, and before you can blink, your mouth fills with sand. You cough and gag, covering your face with the edge of your already filthy tunic. But it's too late. The storm has arrived. The sandstorm. It's fast, furious, and totally unapologetic. You stagger sideways, eyes burning, ears filled with the sound of air howling past mud brick walls and through reed fences. The entire village transforms into a chaos of flying grit and swirling dust devils. You can't see more than a few feet ahead. The sun vanishes behind a curtain of gold and beige. It feels like the world has been erased and rewritten, in scratchy, suffocating static. You duck under an awning, barely sheltered by a cluster of woven mats tied together for shade. The wind rattles it like a drum. Sand pushes in from every direction, fine as flour and relentless. It gets in your nose, your eyes, between your teeth. You're chewing dirt and blinking tears. You swear you feel it crawling into your ears. And here's the fun part. This can go on for hours, or longer. One knows exactly how long this one will last, and you're already wondering how your eyeballs are still inside your head. This is not an unusual event. Sandstorms are a regular part of Egyptian life, especially during the Khamsin season. Khamsin, the 50 days, is the term for the hot, dry winds that sweep in from the Sahara, carrying with them suffocating heat and mountains of airborne sand. They arrive suddenly, turning clear skies into sepia-toned voids and dropping visibility to near zero. They choke the lungs and sear the skin. Some are short bursts, others drag on endlessly, bending palm trees and layering entire homes in a new shade of misery. People around you are reacting with practiced efficiency. Women rush to pull cloth over baskets. A man grabs a sheep by its leg and drags it into a mud shelter. Children vanish into doorways, disappearing like smoke. No panic, just routine. This is just another Tuesday for them. For you, it's a biblical plague with exfoliating side effects. You close your eyes and try to wait it out, but that only makes you more aware of the dust caking your face, the itch in your throat, the way your sweat turns instantly to muddy streaks across your skin. You're sweating and freezing at the same time because the storm steals moisture, pulls heat from your skin, then blasts it with dry air so hot it stings. You glance down at your hands. They look older already, cracked, grimy and red. You were only outside for a few minutes before taking shelter, but the damage is obvious. It's like the wind sandpapered you just for showing up. Here's your historical fact of the day. Ancient Egyptian eye problems were rampant, and sandstorms were one of the major culprits. The combination of wind, dust, sun, and untreated infections made eye diseases incredibly common. There were even entire medical scrolls devoted to treating eye conditions, often with mixtures involving honey, sour milk, and, for some reason, pulverized donkey liver. You don't have any of that on hand, but the itching in your eyes is getting bad enough that you might try it if someone offered. And here's your fringe fact. During certain festivals, sandstorms were interpreted as omens, sometimes warnings from the gods, sometimes messages from the dead. Entire rituals were conducted to appease spirits believed to stir up these tempests. You wonder, as you huddle behind your half-collapsed wall of mats, if some priest somewhere is chanting to calm the wind right now, or if they're just also hiding and hoping it ends before dinner. You try to stand, to reposition yourself in the shadow of a nearby wall, and the wind nearly knocks you over. You brace yourself against a pile of clay bricks, which shift slightly under your weight. You freeze, worried you're about to collapse someone's home. Fortunately, the structure holds. You do not. You drop to a crouch again, hugging your knees, hoping you don't become one of those unfortunate archaeological discoveries found with a permanent look of surprise on their face. This is the part they don't show in the movies. Everyone loves the aesthetic of blowing sands and epic pyramids silhouetted in the golden light, but no one talks about what happens when the wind decides to turn your lungs into a gravel pit. You've seen mummy cases better preserved than your dignity right now. Here's the scholarly debate for this stormy afternoon. While sandstorms were clearly a part of Egyptian life, how much they actually affected agriculture and daily survival is still argued. Some say they were merely inconvenient, something that communities adapted to. Others believe they could be catastrophic, stripping topsoil, damaging irrigation systems and triggering famines. Without consistent records, the truth is probably somewhere in between. Deeply annoying most of the time, but occasionally devastating when mixed with a bad flood season or failed harvest. Eventually the wind starts to weaken. Not stop, just ease up a little, as if the storm itself is taking a break. You peek out and see shapes moving again. People re-emerge slowly, cautiously. A few are already sweeping doorways and patting down goats. Someone sneezes, loudly and miserably. The world still looks like it was smudged with a dirty thumb, but at least it's visible again. You step out feeling like you've been aged 5 years in 15 minutes. Your hair is stiff, your mouth is dry as parchment, your skin is tight with dust. A thick crust of sand has formed along your eyebrows. You wipe it away and immediately regret it, because you just scraped sunburned skin with sandpaper. You walk, blinking through the haze, and find a basin of water sitting on a stool near someone's door. You don't ask permission. You just dunk your hands, splash your face, and breathe like a man who's seen the inside of a sandblaster. The water turns cloudy instantly. A child nearby glares at you. You realise you probably just used her family's only rinse bucket. You nod an apology, and she sticks out her tongue. Fair. You feel hollowed out. Your ears are full of sand, your lips are cracked, and your tunic now weighs an extra 5 pounds. The storm has left you with the kind of fatigue that makes your bones ache. You keep moving, mostly because you're too grimy to sit. That's when you hear it again. Laughter. Real, honest laughter. A group of people is sitting together in the sun's slow return, sipping something from clay jars and talking like nothing happened. This is just life here. Sandstorms, scorching heat, eye infections, judgmental goats. It's all part of the rhythm. You're the one out of sync. You watch as someone pulls a mat into the sun and starts brushing off the dust. There's no whining, no cursing the heavens, no "I need a refund." Just another chore to check off before the next ordeal. And you're still tasting sand every time you breathe. But hey, at least you didn't die. Yet. The sky's clearing finally. The storm has passed, and in its wake the world is coated in a thin beige crust. It's on the rooftops, clinging to every plant, packed into the cracks of walls, and especially nestled in your ear canal. You shake your head, and more dust falls from your hair than you thought was physically possible. Congratulations, you are now 20% sand by volume. The mood around you is shifting. People are getting back to work swiftly, efficiently. A few men are repairing the side of a granary, and a group of women are already out in the sun, rinsing pots and laying out reeds to dry. The village hums again, like a beehive shaking off a threat. No siesta, no break, just life marching on under the blistering sun. You try to blend in, but it's hard to look casual when you're limping sunburned and constantly blinking sand from your eyes like a malfunctioning animatronic. A sharp, rhythmic tapping draws your attention toward the fields beyond the edge of the village. You follow the sound, picking your way around makeshift fences and lazy goats, until you reach a work site that smells like heat, sweat, and something vaguely herbal. It's a wide-open plot buzzing with movement. Dozens of workers are bent over, placing clay bricks, shoveling dirt, dragging baskets of mud on wooden sleds. Some chant while they work, a low, droning rhythm that keeps their pace steady. You've stumbled into a temple restoration project, or maybe just a construction site. Either way, everyone looks exhausted and none of them stop moving. A man slaps another on the back with a kind of grunted encouragement. A supervisor with a reed whip walks the line slowly. He's not using it yet, but it sways in his hand like a warning. You try to look useful and not like a complete idiot. You pick up a basket nearby. It's heavier than it looks and full of bricks. Instantly your back twinges and your arms scream. You wobble, take a few awkward steps, and spill half the contents into the dust. Smooth. Really smooth. A nearby worker laughs loudly. You want to melt into the sand and disappear. One of the brickmakers comes over. He's shirtless, caked in dried mud from chest to knees, and offers you a nod. He gestures to the raw clay pits nearby, where others are stomping on wet earth to mix it. You step into the pit, and your feet sink instantly. The mud is warm and squishy and weirdly full of tiny bits of straw. It oozes between your toes. Not unpleasant, until a rock stabs your heel. You hiss, lift your foot, and discover that this ancient blend of soil is not nearly as forgiving as it looks. And here's your historical insight for the day. Most large-scale labour in Egypt, especially for state or religious projects, was not performed by slaves. That's a popular myth, mostly thanks to Hollywood. The reality is more nuanced. Many of the labourers were seasonal workers, farmers who came during the Nile's inundation period when the fields were underwater and unworkable. They were fed, housed, even compensated. Not luxurious living, but not chains and whips either. That said, conditions were still gruelling. Long hours, intense sun, back-breaking labour. A day's work could leave you with permanent injuries. You try to keep up the pace, copying the motions of the man next to you, pressing wet clay into a wooden mould, flipping it out onto the ground and letting it bake in the sun. It's satisfying in a weird way. Messy but simple. Tangible. You can feel the ancient rhythm of it, the almost meditative repetition. And you're covered in filth, which somehow feels more honest than just being sweaty and confused. The man beside you smiles, just a little. A rare moment of approval. Then he starts singing. It's not melodic, more of a call and response chant. A few others join in. You don't understand the words, but the cadence draws you in. You hum along, out of sync but trying. For a second it feels like you belong here, until your hands cram, and your back locks up, and you realise that despite your best efforts you are woefully out of shape for this timeline. You stagger out of the pit and sit on a sun-warmed rock nearby. Your tunic is plastered to your body, your skin streaked in browns and greens. You smell like a marsh, and not in a cute, earthy kind of way. More like something that should be thrown back into the Nile with an apology letter to the gods. Someone offers you a cup of water. You hesitate. Could be Nile water. Could be boiled. Could be a gamble. But you're so thirsty your tongue is trying to shrivel up and evacuate. You sip. It's tepid, a little gritty, but blessedly wet. You let it sit in your mouth like a prayer before swallowing. Here's your fringe fact. Labourers were often given amulets for protection. Tiny charms made of faience or bone, sometimes shaped like scarabs or ankhs. These were believed to offer health, strength, and divine favour during hard tasks. Some even had inscriptions, like early motivational quotes. Life, prosperity, health. It's the ancient version of a hang in there cat poster, only with more spiritual weight and fewer kittens. You think about asking for one. You could use all the divine favour you can get, but instead you force yourself to stand and stretch. Your back pops in ways that make the nearby goat flinch. Now here's the open scholarly debate for today. How much agency did these workers actually have? Were they volunteers motivated by civic duty and religion, or was it more voluntold with consequences for refusal? The evidence goes both ways. Some documents suggest pride in temple and tomb work, others hint at coercion. As with most things in ancient Egypt, the truth depends heavily on status, geography, and who's writing the records. Spoiler, it's usually the priests or scribes, not the guys hauling bricks. The afternoon sun is still blazing, but slightly less murderous now. A supervisor walks past and eyes you. Not with anger, just mild pity. You've lasted about an hour in the mud pit, and already look like you need divine intervention. You nod at him, like, "Yep, I'm terrible at this," and he snorts before moving on. You start walking again, shoes squelching with wet clay, and realise you're kind of proud of yourself. You made a brick. A real, sun-drying, ancient Egyptian brick. That's probably the most productive thing you've done since arriving. It won't go in a pyramid, but maybe it'll become part of someone's goat pen, and that's something. As the sun dips a little lower in the sky, the energy of the place changes again. People are slowing down, stretching their aching bodies, joking softly. The day's not over, not by a long shot, but you've survived a labour shift. Sort of. You're crusted in mud, blinking against the glare, and already dreading the next wave of sand, bugs, or spiritual judgment, but hey, you made it through temple duty without dying. Now if only you could get the mud out of your ear. You peel yourself away from the mud pit like a molting lizard, limbs stiff, tunic clinging to you like regret. The heat hasn't relented, it's just evolved into a different flavour of torture. The sticky late afternoon haze that hangs like a wet towel on your shoulders. Every step you take squishes. You've got clay in places no modern human was designed to store clay. You glance down and realise your knees are now two-toned, mud brown with sunburn red underneath. Very fashionable, very cursed. As you limp back toward the village, the sound of bells reaches your ears, soft, rhythmic, ceremonial. It's not celebration exactly, it's worship. You follow the sound, half curious, half drawn in by instinct. Like maybe the gods might offer you a wet wipe and an apology for your suffering. A small crowd is gathering at the edge of the temple grounds. The structure is grand but weathered. Thick columns carved with symbols you can't decipher. Walls painted in colours that have miraculously survived centuries of sunlight and sand. You step closer and feel it instantly, the shift in energy. People are quieter here, faces more serious. There's incense burning, something rich and spicy, maybe frankincense or cinnamon bark. It rolls through the air in ghostly tendrils, mixing with the ever-present smell of humanity to create something that almost feels holy. Priests move through the courtyard, shaven-headed, barefoot, draped in white linen that somehow isn't covered in mud or sweat like yours. They look otherworldly, or maybe just well practiced in dignity. You probably look like something that crawled out of the Nile and immediately lost a fight with a goat. You slip into the back of the crowd as a ritual begins. A man, clearly a high priest, begins chanting. His voice is low, measured, echoing off the stone. Others join in, swaying slightly, palms lifted. The language is beautiful, haunting even, but you catch none of it. Still, the atmosphere makes the hair on your arms stand up. Whether or not you believe in divine beings, the sheer weight of belief here is inescapable. These people don't worship casually. Their gods are everywhere. In the river, the wind, the grain, the sunrise, and especially in their rulers. Which brings us to Pharaoh. You've probably seen the glamorized version, gleaming headdress, perfect eyeliner, standing proud in golden sandals while people bow and toss lotus petals. But here's the reality. The Pharaoh isn't just a king, he's a god, literally. Or at least a living conduit between the divine and the dusty, the bridge between heaven and tax collection. The walking embodiment of Ma'at, order, balance, truth. His job is to keep the world from descending into chaos. No pressure. And here's your historical fact. Pharaohs weren't just political leaders. They were considered NTR, divine. Their words carried not just legal power, but cosmic authority. When a pharaoh gave an order, it wasn't just law, it was sacred law. His role was to please the gods, uphold rituals, maintain Nile cycles, and occasionally crush enemies with chariot wheels. From birth, pharaohs were trained to rule as if the very sun would stop rising without their involvement. You're not seeing him today, of course. Not unless you plan to sneak into the capital and survive multiple layers of bureaucracy and sharp spears. But his influence is everywhere. His name is on temple walls, carved into statues stamped onto official seals. His likeness gazes down from every sacred mural, wearing that same unreadable expression, benevolent or terrifying depending on the light. The ritual continues, and now they're singing, high, tremulous, probably led by temple singers trained from childhood. You catch a flash of something gold, a priest carrying a statue of a falcon-headed god, likely Horus, the god of kingship, of sky and war. Fitting. The crowd lowers to their knees, and you drop awkwardly to match them. It's not graceful. You squish. A kid nearby glances at you and covers a smile. Here's your fringe fact for the evening sermon. Ancient Egyptians had temple barks, girsi, or sacred boats made of wood and gold that were used to carry divine statues during religious processions. The gods were quite literally taken for boat rides, because being a deity apparently came with cruise privileges. These processions were major events, complete with music, dancing, food offerings, and tightly choreographed rituals. For a moment the divine was visible, accessible, and carried through the streets like a very high-maintenance celebrity. The smell of incense gets stronger, sharp and floral now. It clings to your clothes in a welcome way, masking your less divine aroma. The ceremony ends with a final chant, and people begin to scatter, quietly murmuring to one another or heading back to their homes. The sun's begun to lower in the sky, painting everything in burnt orange and soft gold. It's the kind of light that makes even the mud look sacred. You sit back on your heels and let the air move over your face. Here's where things get complicated. While Egyptians saw their pharaoh as godly, modern scholars are still debating the degree to which this was pure belief versus political narrative. Was it widespread conviction, or top-down ideology reinforced through art, law, and ritual? Did the average field worker truly believe the pharaoh controlled the floods, or did they just know better than to say otherwise? It's hard to tell. Most of the records we have were written by scribes serving the state, meaning they had very little incentive to jot down doubts or distant whispers. But still, you feel something here. Maybe it's the rhythm of the chant still echoing in your ears, or the way the light hits the temple stones just right. Maybe it's just exhaustion playing tricks on your sense of wonder. But the idea that a ruler might also be divine doesn't seem quite so ridiculous in this moment. This land runs on layers, of sand and of symbolism, of submission to things bigger than yourself. As you rise to your feet and brush the dirt from your knees, you notice that people are leaving offerings at the temple steps. Bowls of grain, clusters of dates, carved wooden animals. One woman gently places a lotus flower in a shallow dish of water and whispers something you can't hear. You want to ask what she said, but you already know it doesn't matter. It wasn't meant for you. It was meant for someone or something that lives in this world long before you showed up and will be here long after you're gone. You walk back toward the village, quiet now, mind full of smoke and sun and gods with animal heads. The wind is softer, the light gentler. Your feet ache, your skin still stings, but somehow you feel anchored. Like for all the hardship, this world has a pulse, and today, for a few precious minutes, you felt it. Even if you're still completely unworthy of it. The scent of incense fades behind you as you wander slowly away from the temple, though it still clings to your hair like a reminder that you just knelt in the shadow of a god, whether you meant to or not. Your legs ache, your knees are dust-streaked, and your stomach, dear persistent stomach, starts grumbling again. It's been hours since that gritty beer bread combo, and now your body wants something less ceremonial and more edible. Too bad you're in ancient Egypt, where the line between food and folk remedy is often blurry and sometimes terrifying. You follow your nose. There is something cooking nearby, smoky, slightly sweet, and herbal, in a way that suggests stomach soothing, which sounds like exactly what your internal organs are currently filing a petition for. You duck down another alley and find a small courtyard where an elderly woman is hunched over a blackened clay pot. She stirs it slowly with a long wooden spoon, mumbling softly to herself and maybe singing or reciting something. The pot bubbles gently, sending up plumes of steam that smell like garlic, coriander, and something floral, possibly hibiscus. You watch from a distance, wondering if she's cooking dinner or summoning spirits. Hard to tell. She notices you. Doesn't speak. Just gestures with the spoon, an invitation or a warning. You step closer. She ladles a portion of the brew into a shallow ceramic bowl and hands it to you with a look that says, "Eat and then." You take it. It's warm, thick and flecked with herbs. You sip, cautiously. The taste is hard to place, sour, savoury, with a weirdly chalky aftertaste. It's not awful, it's not great, but it's food, and your stomach after its dusty rollercoaster of a day is too grateful to complain. She sits back down without another word, resuming her slow stirring. You nod in thanks and retreat to the edge of the courtyard. A mangy dog eyes you suspiciously from the shadows. You sit, you eat, and you realise you've just been given medicine, or possibly very suspicious soup. Here's your historical fact for the evening meal. Egyptian medicine was a blend of practical and spiritual. Doctors, or SWMWs, were trained in both physical treatments and magical spells. They used a combination of herbs, animal products, and rituals to diagnose and cure. Their approach was holistic in the literal sense. Your illness might be caused by a demon, an angry god, or just too much spicy pigeon. Either way, treatment usually involved honey, garlic, or something unpleasant jammed up your nose. And here's a detail to really spice up your dreams. Crocodile dung was once used as a contraceptive, that's right, mixed with honey or natron and inserted strategically. Scholars are still debating whether it was symbolic, physical, or both, but it shows how far they were willing to go for preventative care. You sip the last of the bowl, unsure if you feel better or just confused, but something inside you relaxes. Maybe it's the warmth, or the herbs, or just the placebo effect of not having to chew sand for once. You hand the bowl back and smile. The old woman grunts and waves you off. You head toward the market area, where the evening crowd is beginning to gather. As the sun dips lower, the light shifts to a soft copper. It bathes everything in warmth that looks beautiful, but still feels like it's trying to roast you gently. Vendors are out again, hawking fresh produce, baskets of onions, bundles of leeks and garlic, clay pots filled with what might be dates or dried figs. Smoke rises from small cooking fires, and the air hums with chatter and the occasional goat's opinion. You pass a stall with dried fish hanging from a rack crusted in salt and flies. Next to it, a man is selling crushed lotus and papyrus paste, probably for poultices or perfume. A young girl offers you a whiff of something in a bowl. It smells like mint mixed with vinegar and mud. You shake your head politely, trying not to gag. She shrugs and moves on to another passerby, undeterred. You can't stop thinking about your body. Not in a vain way. There's nothing remotely attractive about what's happening with your face right now, but in a survival way. You're sore, itchy, and slightly nauseated. Your skin is dry and burning despite all the sweat. Your eyes sting, and your stomach, despite the herbal sludge you just swallowed, is clearly working out a few issues in committee. You stop by a water trough and splash your face again. Not clean water, not even close, but it's cool. At this point, even mild relief feels like luxury. You're beginning to understand how fragile health is here. You take a bad sip of something, you're bedridden, a scratch on your foot festers for too long, infection, a sandstorm gets in your eyes. Welcome to blindness. In this time, staying alive is a full-time job, and medical knowledge, what little exists, is patchy and inconsistent. If you're lucky, you end up with a skilled practitioner. If not, you're chewing fermented donkey milk while someone chants at your spleen. Here's your fringe fact for the evening stroll. Ancient Egyptian doctors were sometimes specialists. There were doctors of the belly, doctors of the eyes, and even shepherds of the anus. Yes, that was a title. They treated rectal issues, which were not uncommon given the local diet and hygiene. And we complain about modern job descriptions. As you meander through the market, you see someone get hurt. A man trips over a broken basket and goes down hard, hitting his arm on a stone. People rush to help him. There's no ambulance, no clinic, just concerned hands and a shout for someone who knows what to do. A young woman appears, brisk and focused, carrying a bundle of cloth and a small jar of honey. She presses the honey into the wound, natural antiseptic, and wraps it tight with linen. You watch, fascinated. It's crude, but it works. Probably better than some of the magical treatments you've heard about today. She catches your eye, and for a moment you feel something weird. Admiration. These people, for all their curses and crocodile-based treatments, get by, they adapt, they make do, they survive in a world where one wrong bite from an insect can end your career, and possibly your existence. Now here's your scholarly debate. How much of Egyptian medicine was actually effective versus symbolic? Some argue that the physical treatments, honey for wounds, garlic for infections, willow for pain, show a surprisingly advanced knowledge of natural remedies. Others believe it was mostly superstition wrapped in tradition. Truth is, it's both. They were learning, experimenting, surviving with what they had, and trying to make sense of a body that broke far more easily than we'd like to admit. As twilight deepens, you sit near a fire pit, rubbing your temples. Your headache has returned, a dull throb behind your eyes. Maybe it's dehydration. Maybe it's the sheer cognitive load of adapting to a world that seems determined to break you in slow motion. You think about how much you take for granted in your own time. Antibiotics, clean bandages, Tylenol. Here, pain is a companion, illness is routine, and healing is part science, part luck, part prayer. A woman walks past carrying a jar of what looks like castor oil. You catch a whiff. Bitter. Earthy. It's a laxative, you remember reading. Also used in lamp fuel and possibly as a skin treatment. Multi-purpose or just desperate? Hard to say. You close your eyes for a moment, exhausted in a way that has nothing to do with muscles. It's the kind of tired that lives in your bones, in your teeth, in your worry. You're learning the hard way that in ancient Egypt the body is both your temple and your prison. And most of the time, you're the one patching the cracks. You wake up coughing. Again. Not from illness, not quite, but from the layer of dust and smoke that's apparently the default atmosphere around here. You slept on a reed mat under a small awning behind one of the houses, not because you were invited, but because you physically couldn't walk another step without falling over. Your back is paying the price. You shift slightly, and feel every vertebrae crack in protest like twigs snapping underfoot. The air is cooler now, still dry, still a little pungent, but not the oppressive furnace it was earlier. Morning in ancient Egypt comes early and without mercy. There are no blackout curtains, no snooze buttons, just light creeping across the clay walls and a chorus of animal sounds that makes you question the entire concept of peaceful sunrise. Donkeys bray like there. Announcing the apocalypse. Roosters, yes they exist, scream like they're mad about still being alive. Somewhere a baby wails. You groan softly and sit up. What you really want is a shower, or a bath, or at least a hose and 5 gallons of lemon-scented soap. What you get is a bucket. A single, lukewarm, questionably clean bucket. A man nearby eyes you skeptically as you scoop a handful and splash it onto your face. It helps, slightly. Just enough to wipe off the top layer of grime and reveal the one underneath. You're sunburned, bruised, itchy, and probably growing something fungal behind your ears. Congratulations, you're officially one of the locals. As people stir to life around you, you notice something else happening. A transformation of sorts. It's subtle, but undeniable. Women are lining their eyes with dark pigment using tiny sticks dipped into coal pots. Men, too. Their faces, tired and lined with age or labour, take on a strange elegance as the black outlines sharpen their eyes into something both fierce and mesmerising. You recognise it immediately. The signature look of ancient Egypt. That winged eyeliner wasn't just fashion, it was power. And here's your historical fact. The Egyptians wore eye makeup not just for beauty, but for health and protection. The dark pigments, coal made from galena, lead sulfide, and green malachite, were believed to ward off the evil eye, deter flies, and even help prevent eye infections. Modern scientists found that the trace amounts of lead might have actually boosted nitric oxide in the skin, giving the immune system a bit of a kick. So yes, your eyeliner could technically fight bacteria. Ancient beauty was doing double duty. You crouch beside a woman applying hers and get a closer look. Her fingers are quick and practiced. She dips a tiny applicator into a small pot, drags it along her lower lid, then her upper one. The lines are precise, symmetrical, intense. She notices your curiosity and offers a small smile. Then she gestures toward her coal stick, raising an eyebrow. You laugh softly, thinking she's joking. She's not. Before you can protest, she dabs the stick into the pigment and BAM! You get your first taste of ancient Egyptian eye glam. She leans in and with surprising gentleness, lines your lower lids. It stings at first. You blink furiously. It feels like mud mixed with fire. Then it cools, it settles. You blink again. Your vision sharpens ever so slightly. Or maybe you're just imagining it. Either way, you now look mildly terrifying. And here comes your fringe fact. In some temple rituals, priests applied makeup not just to themselves, but to statues of the gods. Yes, divine eyeliner. The belief was that these images of gods needed to see in the spiritual realm, and eye paint allowed them to channel vision and power more effectively. Basically, you're walking around with a supernatural webcam installed on your face. You walk through the narrow lanes of the village, now buzzing with life. Everyone's dressed in variations of the same linen tunics, white or off-white, depending on how many times they've been washed or sun-bleached. No one's wearing much. The heat doesn't allow for modesty. Kids run barefoot in nothing but belts or beads. Women wear sleeveless dresses tied over one shoulder. Men are mostly shirtless, their kilts wrapped tight around the waist. It's practical, breathable, and designed to endure this punishing climate. You, however, are not. You're sweating through your linen like a guilty politician, and no amount of eyeliner can hide the fact that you smell like despair and fermented goat. And here's the kicker. No deodorant. Not even a primitive version. You pass a man crushing something in a bowl, probably herbs or flower petals, and realise it's perfume. He rubs a bit onto his chest and underarms, a gesture so casual and universal it transcends language. You point at the bowl and mime the same. He laughs and hands it to you. You dab some on and instantly regret it. Strong, sharp, earthy in a way that suggests something between rosemary and whatever a swamp witch uses in her bathwater. But it does mask the stench of labour and poor decisions, so you go with it. Now here's your open scholarly debate. Did ancient Egyptians really wear perfume for hygiene? Or was it purely spiritual? Some believe that scents were part of purification rituals, designed to make one more appealing to the gods or to protect against malevolent spirits. Others argue it was just good manners in a world where bathing was rare and sweat was constant. Some of the wealthier even wore wax cones on their heads made of perfumed fat that slowly melted over the evening. Think of it as a very slow, slightly drippy air freshener attached to your scalp. You're halfway through rubbing more of the mystery paste under your arms when you realise a child is staring at you. She makes a gagging noise, then runs away laughing. Great! You smell worse and you've traumatised a 6-year-old. Peak performance. You duck into a shaded stall to escape the sun and get a moment's rest. A woman is selling linen cloths, probably used for garments, bedrolls, maybe even bandages. You glance at yourself in a polished bronze mirror hanging nearby. Your face is streaked with coal but also dust. Your lips are cracked. Your neck is visibly peeling. The skin on your shoulders looks like dried papyrus. No skincare routine is saving you here. And here's your final kicker. Ancient Egyptians did have some skincare regimens, using castor oil, moringa and honey to moisturise. Honey was especially popular, antibacterial, hydrating and sacred enough to offer to gods. Of course, it also attracts insects and smells like a breakfast buffet. So there's a trade-off. You buy a scrap of linen, if awkwardly hold out a shiny bead and hope for the best counts as buying. The vendor accepts and hands you the cloth. You wipe your face and try to dab your neck and end up tying it around your head like some kind of makeshift turban. It's not stylish, but it keeps the sun off your scalp, and frankly, dignity is a distant memory at this point. As the morning stretches on, the heat climbs again, and the marketplace begins to shimmer. People fan themselves with woven fronds. You take a seat under a palm that's doing its best to provide shade, and you finally let yourself exhale. You've survived the sacred rituals, the goat stares, the weird soup, and the gift of swamp perfume. And now you're sitting cross-legged in the middle of a sand-caked village, coal around your eyes, smelling like Rosemary's evil cousin, and wondering how in the name of Ra your ancestors managed this every day. One word, grit, literal and metaphorical. You're starting to understand the rhythm of this place. Sort of. Not comfortably, not confidently, but in the way someone learns to tread water just before drowning. The sounds, the smells, the heat, the rough edges of daily life, they don't hit you quite as hard now. You still don't belong, but you're not actively collapsing every 5 minutes either, so progress. By midday, you've seen enough of the marketplace and your social energy is drained. Not that you had much to begin with after a night sleeping under a goat-blessed awning. You wander toward a quieter part of the village, past homes that all blur together. Mud brick structures with flat roofs and windows so small they barely qualify as holes. You notice a group of men gathered beneath a date palm, taking a break. They're sprawled out on mats, chewing something, chatting lazily. You sit a little distance away, grateful for the shade. Then you realise you haven't changed clothes. Not once. You look down at your tunic, which has gone from off-white to something resembling marshland beige. It smells like sweat, fish, incense, and despair. And so does everyone else. This is just the reality. There's no wardrobe rotation, no sock or nut drawer. Clothing here is minimal, reused and washed whenever the Nile permits. Sometimes people own only one garment, two if they're fancy. Your linen tunic is clinging to your body in all the wrong places. It's coarse, stiff in spots from dried sweat and river residue, and it chafes badly. The back of your neck, your underarms, the tops of your thighs, everything itches. You try scratching, which only spreads the dust around. You try tugging it loose, but the fabric pulls in ways that make things worse. You're living in your own personal hell, one stitched by ancient hands with good intentions and zero sense of comfort. Here's your historical fact. Egyptian linen, while light and breathable, wasn't exactly soft. It was made from flax, spun by hand and woven on horizontal looms. The higher quality stuff, finer, whiter, more tightly woven, was reserved for the elite or for burial linens. The average person got the scratchy version. And there were no dyes unless you were very wealthy. Most clothes were plain sun-bleached white or beige. Practical? Yes. Stylish? Only if you're into the crumpled paper bag and a sauna aesthetic. Eventually, you spot someone hanging wet clothes on a line stretched between two palm trunks. They're slapping the fabric against a flat stone first, scrubbing it with what looks like clay and ash. The soap of the time. You wander over, curious. A woman notices your approach and, without asking, grabs the hem of your tunic and gives it a sniff. Her face says it all. You don't speak the language, but you absolutely understand what in Anubis's name died on you through facial expressions alone. She shoos you behind a low wall and tosses a spare cloth your way. It's a simple wrap. Clean, slightly damp, and blessedly soft. You fumble with it, trying to wrap it around yourself without flashing the entire village. She rolls her eyes and helps, expertly tying it over one shoulder and tucking the excess fabric into a belt of rope. You feel human again? Slightly ridiculous, yes, but much cooler. She snatches your old tunic with tongs and dumps it into a vat of steaming water. You hope it survives, you're not convinced it should. And here's your fringe fact for today. Some wealthier Egyptians owned scented linens. Yes, actual fragrance-infused garments. They soaked their clothes in lotus oil, frankincense and myrrh, both for religious reasons and as a subtle power flex. Imagine walking past someone and their outfit literally smells like a sacred garden. Meanwhile, you're out here smelling like river rot and roasted onion. You wander off in your borrowed wrap, grateful for the airflow. The chafing has calmed down to a dull throb. Your thighs might recover. Maybe. If you survive the rest of the day without being consumed by more fabric-related trauma. As you walk, you begin to notice how the heat interacts with the clothing. It's smart in a brutal kind of way. The looser the fabric, the more circulation. The lighter the colour, the less sun it absorbs. There are no heavy robes, no tight seams, no collars or sleeves unless you're a high priest or about to be mummified. And even then, they cut corners where they can. Still, there's very little protection. Your shoulders are sunburned, your ankles are scabbed, your scalp, despite your makeshift linen head wrap, feels like it's been slow-cooked all morning. You spot a child rubbing something on his arms and legs, a dark paste or tints. You lean closer and realise it's mud. Not the gross, gunky kind you were slogging through in the brick pit, but a fine, wet, almost clay consistency. His mother applies it like sunscreen. Ah, that makes sense. And here's your open scholarly debate. Did ancient Egyptians use mud and clay as primitive sunblock? Some archaeologists think so. Others argue it was more ritual than function, cleansing, symbolic, or even just for cooling off. But it makes practical sense. A barrier from the heat, a way to trap moisture, maybe even protection from insect bites. It's not SPF 50, but it beats getting slowly broiled alive. You try a little on your forearms. It's cool, surprisingly soothing. The kid nods approvingly. You feel like you've passed a test. You wander farther into the outskirts of the village and spot something strange. A man standing very still in the sun, arms out, completely naked except for a loincloth covered in, what else? Mud. He's not moving, just standing there like a statue. You blink, and then he twitches. He's drying, baking himself into a human adobe. Apparently this is a thing. Another man nearby is wearing what might be the strangest accessory you've seen so far. An actual cow tail tied to the back of his belt. At first you think it's ceremonial, or maybe he's part of a procession. But no, he's working in the field swatting flies with it. It's a literal fly-swatting belt. Stylish and functional. You kind of want one. And now the scholarly fringe fact. Certain labourers and even officials wore tail-like adornments to mimic divine animals. It blurred the line between fashion, utility and ritual symbolism. What looks like a ridiculous accessory might have been protection status, or just a trend started by someone with really aggressive flies. You head back toward the shade of the market, your new wrap fluttering gently around your legs, mud drying on your forearms, and your dignity, well, not entirely gone. You pass a group of women laughing over a basket of tangled thread, and you can tell by their tone that someone's outfit malfunctioned. Maybe the belt fell off. Maybe someone's tunic split in an unfortunate place. Either way, ancient Egypt doesn't give you a lot of room for modesty. Wardrobe malfunctions are just another part of life. You've made it through a full day without new injuries, without passing out from the heat, and without flashing the entire village, though it was close. You sit on a stone wall, the sun lowering behind the palms as it let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. It's not comfortable here. It's not clean. And your thighs still feel like sandpaper is taking vengeance. But you're still here, still moving. And in this brutal, beautiful world, that's enough. You finally reach the point where every step feels like a compromise between pain and pride. Your feet, now bare and gritty, have given up protesting. You accepted the inevitable. Sandals weren't doing anything besides collecting more sand and betraying you at the worst moments. So now it's just you, skin against earth, and the very real sensation of stepping on something sharp every 15 minutes. The ground is alive here, not metaphorically, but literally. It's littered with broken pottery, dried thorns, goat droppings, and shards of who knows what from last night's fish feast. Walking is less a mode of transport and more a high-stakes game of what will puncture me next. You shuffle forward with the care of someone crossing a beach of broken glass. And because it's ancient Egypt, that's kind of exactly what you're doing. You step on something again and hiss through your teeth. It's a sharp little fragment, probably pottery, and it slices your heel with surgical efficiency. You sit down immediately, cradling your foot and inspect the damage. Not deep, but enough to bleed. And you know from your rapidly growing collection of infections that a small cut can very quickly become a big regret. A passing boy sees you, pauses, and runs off. You assume he's laughing at you, which would be fair. But a few minutes later he returns with a small clay bowl. Inside is a thick paste, honey mixed with crushed herbs. He gestures for you to hold out your foot. You hesitate, but pain is persuasive. He slathers the concoction on the wound, wraps it in a strip of linen and ties it off. The kid might be 10, but he works like he's seen this 1,000 times. Probably has. And here's your historical fact. Honey was one of the most commonly used medical substances in ancient Egypt. They knew it had healing properties, antibacterial, moisturizing, soothing, and they put it on everything. Wounds, burns, rashes, sore throats. It was the neosporin of its day, only tastier. Some tombs even contain sealed jars of honey that are still technically edible. That's right, 3,000-year-old snackable medicine. You thank the boy with a nod and a weak smile. He shrugs like this is just Tuesday and jogs off. You sit there a moment longer, flexing your foot gently, feeling the mixture cool and sting in equal measure. Then you look down the road and realise you've still got a long walk back into the village. As you limp forward, you start paying closer attention to the ground, not just for self-preservation, but out of curiosity. The sand isn't just sand, it's layered with life. Shards of broken faience, discarded beads, bits of copper wire, smooth stones worn by years of footsteps. This is the floor of a civilization. You're walking over history, or trash. But honestly, sometimes those are the same thing. Here's your fringe fact. The ancient Egyptians had something akin to street sweepers. Workers tasked with cleaning up market areas and temple grounds. These people used brooms made of palm fibre or bundled reeds to clear pathways, particularly around sacred spaces. But in the average neighbourhood, nope. Your foot is the broom, and it's very possible that what just stabbed you belonged to someone's dinner plate 2 pharaohs ago. And speaking of feet, you're starting to notice something else. Calluses. Fast ones. You glance at the soles of your feet, and sure enough they're hardening. Rough patches, thickening skin, early signs of that cracked, desert-worn look you've seen on every local elder since you got here. It's evolution in fast forward. Your body is trying to become Egyptian by brute force. The sun's at its peak again, and the ground is so hot it nearly burns. You dart from shadow to shadow, hugging the edges of buildings where overhangs provide thin strips of mercy. A group of women are weaving under a shaded archway, their feet tucked beneath them on cool mats. They look up briefly as you pass, sweat-streaked, bandaged and limping, and return to their work. It's the same gaze you'd give someone struggling through their first yoga class, pity mixed with mild judgment. You glance at their feet. Bare, of course, but unlike yours, theirs seem invincible, tough, cracked, scarred, yet moving effortlessly across terrain that's been chewing you up all day. These aren't soft, pampered feet. These are survival feet. Here's your scholarly debate. How much of ancient Egyptian life was adapted around going barefoot? Some argue that footwear was so rare for the lower classes that architecture, transportation, and even posture evolved to account for it. Others think people simply endured the pain and they got used to it. But the evidence is clear. Footwear was not the norm. Sandals were reserved for special occasions, elite members of society, or people working in places too dangerous or sacred for bare skin. For everyone else, bare feet were just feet. You finally reach a shady corner of the village where an elderly man is seated on a low stool working on leather straps. He's a sandal maker, or maybe a repairman. You gesture to your feet, your expression saying everything your mouth can't in ancient Egyptian. He chuckles and holds up a half-made sandal, gesturing toward your foot with a silent, "Let's see what we can do." You sit beside him and let him work. He wraps a strap of softened leather around your foot, measures the width, then traces the outline on a strip of thick papyrus board. You watch as he punches holes, threads the leather through, knots it with nimble fingers. No nails, no glue, just tension and technique. It's like watching someone build a tiny boat for your foot, except this boat will be crushed by scorpions if it's not built right. He hands you the finished product and gestures for you to try it. It's stiff at first, rough, but it fits, sort of. He nods, clearly satisfied. You stand, shift your weight, and instantly feel a difference. No more tiny stabbings, no more hot sand licking your soles. You almost cry from relief. Then the other foot starts throbbing. You point at it. He rolls his eyes and starts over. While he works, you ask yourself the inevitable. How did people survive this? Not just walking, but working, farming, building, carrying heavy loads barefoot every single day of their lives. You look around. There's no answer. Just a steady, uncomplaining rhythm of people moving through a world that's rough, hot, and utterly unforgiving. You thank the man with a small bow. He waves you off with the air of someone who's done this 1,000 times and has 10 more orders to fill. You step into your first ever pair of ancient sandals, barely held together. Already digging into your skin, and realise this is the closest thing to luxury you've had in 2 days. Then you step on a pebble. It jams right under the arch of your foot and you immediately reconsider every emotion you just experienced. But still progress. You'd think nightfall in ancient Egypt would bring peace. Maybe a drop in temperature, a break from the sweat parade, a moment where you're not blinking sand from your eyes or pulling thorns out of your toes. You'd be wrong. Night is just a different kind of hard. As the sun slips behind the horizon, casting long shadows over the village and turning the Nile into a ribbon of molten black, the air shifts. It's cooler, yes, but not kind, not gentle. More like the heat took off its armour and came back in secret, hiding in the walls and stones. There's no artificial light here. No glowing screens, no street lamps humming in the distance, no headlights zipping down the road. The entire world dims into a dusky grey, then sinks further into a deep starless void. The moon hasn't risen yet, and the stars, normally brilliant out here, are masked by a faint layer of dust still hanging in the air from today's earlier sandstorm. You try walking, slowly. The new sandals help, but only just. Every few steps, your foot finds a rock, or an animal, or trail left behind by something with too many legs. You're hyper-aware of the ground, of every shift in texture, and for good reason. This is when the real dangers come out. Not the gods, not the priests, not even the sandstorms. No, night belongs to the bugs, and the snakes, and the things that crawl. You feel it first on your ankle. A tickle, a slight movement. You swat at it, expecting a mosquito or a fly. Instead, something crunches under your palm. You pull your hand away and see the unmistakable curve of a beetle. Not the sacred kind they paint in gold and lay in tombs. This one's more alive. It's trying to climb into your sandal. You flick it off and backpedal straight into a swarm of gnats that descend on your face like tiny winged curses. You stumble, cursing, and end up near a torchlit area where a small group of people are preparing their sleeping spots for the night. They're laying mats on rooftops, flat, open-air platforms where the breeze, when it shows up, makes sleep possible. You point upward, questioning. A woman nods and gestures for you to follow. Up a narrow staircase made of uneven stone you go, stepping carefully until you reach the roof. It's not much. Just a few bundles of reeds, a low wall to keep you from rolling off in your sleep, and a view that stretches out across the dark village toward the Nile. The sounds are different here. Quieter, but not silent. You hear crickets, frogs, and the occasional splash in the distance that you pray is a fish, and not a crocodile climbing stairs. Here's your historical fact. Most Egyptians slept on the rooftops during warmer months. It was the only way to avoid suffocating inside their windowless mud brick homes, which trapped heat like pizza ovens. The roofs were accessible, flat, and often doubled as storage or extra living space. Sleeping outside wasn't just common, it was survival. You'd lay out a mat, maybe a pillow stuffed with reeds or cloth, and pray the bugs left you alone long enough to get some rest. You try lying down. The mat's rough, but after the last 2 days it feels like memory foam. You let your body settle. It twitches. It itches. Your sunburned shoulders press into the weave and protest with a fiery ache. You breathe through your nose and instantly regret it. The air smells like clay, river silt, and unwashed humans. You roll onto your side and try again. And then the biting starts. You forgot about the mosquitoes. Rookie mistake. They find you fast, drawn to your modern blood like it's the rarest vintage. You swat wildly, hitting your own face more times than you'd like to admit. A kid nearby hands you a little bundle of smouldering herbs tied with twine. You wave it around, and the smoke drifts toward your face in greasy grey curls. It smells like burning sage mixed with something herbal, and maybe a hint of cow dung, but it works. The bugs thin out. You can breathe again, barely. And maybe, just maybe, you'll survive the night. Here's your fringe fact. Egyptians sometimes used mosquito nets woven from fine linen. They weren't widespread, and certainly not for common folk, but in wealthier homes or official residences, they draped over the beds like gauzy force fields against biting pests. Everyone else relied on fire, smoke, and sheer willpower. As you drift towards sleep, you hear singing, soft and low somewhere in the distance. Maybe a lullaby, maybe a work song. You can't understand the words, but the melody is haunting and slow, like someone pouring their soul into the dusk. It makes the heat bearable, the bugs quieter, the ache in your feet a little more distant. Then somewhere nearby a baby starts crying, loudly, and it doesn't stop. Someone curses, someone else hums louder, trying to drown it out. You shift, trying not to grumble. This place may be ancient, but some things never change. Babies cry, neighbours complain, everyone's tired. And here's your scholarly debate for the evening. How safe was nighttime in ancient Egypt, really? Some historians argue that the lack of artificial light and organised policing made nights dangerous, ripe for thieves, wild animals, and accidents. Others believe that strong community ties, narrow village designs, and spiritual protection rituals made people feel relatively secure. The truth? Probably both. If you were in the right village, knew your neighbours, and kept your amulets nearby, you might sleep soundly. If not, well, enjoy your nightmares. Speaking of protection, you notice a small bundle tucked under someone's mat. A carved figure of Bes, the dwarf god of household safety, childbirth, and sleep. He's grinning, eyes wide, tongue sticking out, knife in hand. Absolutely terrifying, but also kind of adorable. You wish you had one. You roll it over again, finding a position that doesn't poke a sunburn or flex a pulled muscle. It's impossible, but you settle into tolerable. The stars finally show themselves, scattered across the dark sky like salt on black fabric. No light pollution, no buildings reaching upward, just sky. It's overwhelming. You stare until your eyes blur, then close. This is not comfort. This is not luxury. This is survival on the roof of a mud brick home, in a village wrapped around a river full of monsters, under a sky full of ancient gods and impatient insects. You drift into sleep slowly, uneasily, with the smoky herb bundle smouldering nearby, and the ghost of that song still whispering through your mind. Somewhere in the night you swear something brushes your leg. You do not investigate it. You wake with a start, heart pounding, unsure whether it was a nightmare or just the sensation of something crawling across your foot in the dark. Probably both. The sky above you has lightened into a pale grey blue, and the stars are fading fast. Morning in ancient Egypt doesn't so much arrive as it ambushes you. There's no gentle transition, no birdsong chime to start your day, just the blunt force of donkey brays, water jars clanking, and someone shouting about missing fish before you've even wiped the crust from your eyes. You sit up groggily. Your limbs feel stiff as if they were rearranged in the night by a particularly unqualified chiropractor. Your neck cracks like a papyrus scroll, and your lower back screams in a language older than hieroglyphs. You're still on the rooftop, curled up on a straw mat that's now itchy, damp with dew, and offering exactly zero comfort. Around you, other rooftop sleepers are already stirring, stretching, yawning, shaking the night's bugs from their hair. The youngest among them look well rested. You, however, feel like you were gently beaten with river stones in your sleep. And the cherry on top, your feet still hurt. The honey dressing the boy gave you yesterday helped, but there's a pulsing throb in your heel that suggests infection is considering moving in. You squint down and prod it gently. The cut's swollen, slightly red, but not oozing. Yet, you mutter a quiet thanks to whatever local deity is responsible for warding off gangrene. You manage to hobble downstairs and make your way toward the centre of the village, moving like a creaky door hinge. It's early, but activity has already kicked into high gear. Farmers are loading baskets. Women are sweeping dust from in front of their homes, which seems absurd given that dust is the national terrain, but the act is more about ritual than result. Order before chaos. The daily rhythm, even in miniature, is sacred. You pass a group of men heading toward the fields and realise again how rigid the social structure is here. These men will die in the same job they started as children, shoveling, hauling, planting, harvesting, based on their father's place in the social order. There's no resume swap, no dream chasing, no "what do you want to be when you grow up?" The answer is already decided. Here's your historical fact for the morning. Ancient Egypt had one of the most stable social structures of any ancient civilization. At the top, of course, was the pharaoh, followed by nobles, priests, scribes, artisans, merchants, and then, at the base, the labourers and farmers. This structure was enforced not just economically, but spiritually, divinely ordained. To rise above your station wasn't just ambitious, it was considered disruptive, dangerous even. The gods had placed you where you belonged. To question that was to question Maat itself, the sacred order of the universe. You stop to rest in the shade near a workshop where scribes are setting up for the day. One of them, young and smug in that way only people who don't have to carry anything heavy can be, dips a reed pen into black ink and begins scratching lines onto a piece of papyrus. His hands are smooth, his linen spotless. The people around him work twice as hard and get half the food, but he's the one holding the pen, and in this world that means power. A woman approaches with a clay tablet and begins pleading. You don't understand the words, but the body language is clear. She's asking for something, probably help with a tax issue, or a land dispute, or a missing delivery. The scribe barely looks up. He nods once, scribbles something and waves her away. She leaves, shoulders low, eyes hollow. You feel an itch behind your sternum that isn't from sand or sweat this time. This is the other side of ancient Egypt. The one the history books romanticized just enough to make you forget how suffocating it must have been to live in a world where your status wasn't just assumed. It was enforced with cosmic importance. You don't rise, you don't question, you stay where you are, forever. And here's your fringe fact. Some Egyptians believed your place in society carried over into the afterlife. Not only were you stuck in the same role in life, but even death didn't get you a promotion. If you were a servant in this world, you might spend eternity doing the same work, unless your family buried you with figurines called shabtis, tiny statues that would magically do your labour for you in the afterlife. Ancient Egyptian outsourcing, basically. You continue your slow walk through the village, more aware now of the unspoken boundaries between people. Farmers speak only to other farmers. Children watch you, whispering among themselves, unsure whether you're someone's weird cousin or an omen. The local priest walks past, robes freshly pressed, and everyone steps back. Even you do. It's automatic. Power carries weight here, and you can feel it. You pass a boy sitting on a ledge, carving something into a scrap of wood. It's crude, maybe a toy or a charm. You sit beside him and point at the carving. He holds it up, a small figure, maybe a jackal or a cat. He doesn't smile, just watches you quietly. You realise he probably already knows his future. It's in his hands, literally and metaphorically. He's making what his father made, what his son will make. Here's your scholarly debate of the day. How rigid was ancient Egyptian society really? Some argue it was almost entirely fixed, with little opportunity for movement. Others suggest that skilled individuals, particularly scribes or artists, could rise in status if they found favour with a noble or priest. A few stories even mentioned slaves buying their freedom and becoming landowners. But for the vast majority, upward mobility was more myth than reality. One more way this world demanded endurance over aspiration. You rise again and continue walking, your foot reminding you with each step that infection doesn't care about your philosophical musings. You find a bench near a well and sit, listening to the thud of buckets, the murmurs of morning prayers, and the creak of carts being dragged through dust. It's mesmerising, this predictability, this repetition. There's no question what you'll be doing today or tomorrow or next year. And that's not comforting, it's suffocating. Back home, you've got 10 tabs open in your browser and 3 backup plans for your 5-year goals. Here, you're lucky if you get through the day with all your fingers and a decent meal. There's no chasing passion projects, no side hustle, just the slow grinding wheel of survival. And if you're lucky, a little honey on your wound. You rub your temples and stare at the horizon. Somewhere out there, past the river, past the fields, maybe even past the walls of the palace, are people who get to write the rules, who get to change their story. But you're stuck. And for the first time since arriving, you truly feel what that means. You stand, brush off the dust, and hobble back into the sun. You've got nothing to do and nowhere to go, but that too is part of the structure. Welcome to the bottom of the pyramid. You're beginning to notice something odd. It's not the sand, though there's plenty of that, or the stench, or even the lingering throb in your sun-scalded feet. It's the way people keep talking about death. Casually, constantly, like it's part of their to-do list. You pass a group of women weaving linen, and one of them is humming a song that, based on the tone and gestures, seems to be about burial shrouds. A man leads his donkey by, mumbling a blessing that mentions a peaceful passage. 2 children run past you, laughing and pretending to weigh each other's hearts on imaginary scales. You get the sinking feeling you've stumbled into a civilization that thinks about dying more than you think about what to eat for lunch. And here's your historical fact for the day. Death wasn't just accepted in ancient Egypt, it was planned for, actively. From the moment you could afford to, you started preparing for your departure. Tombs, coffins, amulets, texts, offerings, clothing for the afterlife, lists of servants, real or carved. Everything had to be accounted for, because death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of your real job, navigating the terrifying, rule-laden and absolutely chaotic Egyptian afterlife. You're drawn toward a courtyard where a group of artisans are chiselling away at slabs of limestone. At first, you think they're just sculpting statues or friezes for a temple, but then you spot the unmistakable shape of a sarcophagus lid. It's not for a pharaoh. This is no golden, jewel-encrusted masterpiece. It's for someone of moderate wealth, maybe a merchant or a mid-level priest. The face carved into the lid is serene, idealised, and completely inaccurate to whatever the real person looked like. Because in the afterlife, you get a glow-up. A man next to the stone is mixing paint, black, red and ochre, preparing to fill in the hieroglyphs. You lean in to look. The symbols snake down the slab in precise rows, and though you can't read them, you know what they're about. Spells, instructions, warnings. One wrong move in the afterlife and your soul could get eaten by a part lion, part hippo, part crocodile creature called Amit. It's a whole process. You know what's scarier than death? Bureaucracy after death. You shuffle over to the shade of a palm and watch as someone brings out a basket of funerary figurines, shabtis, each one carefully carved and painted. They're like little worker dolls. In the afterlife, when the gods call you to perform labour, your shabtis are supposed to step in and say, "Don't worry, boss, we've got this." Essentially, you're eternal unpaid interns. A young woman notices you staring and hands you one of the dolls. It's small, barely 6 inches, painted blue, with tiny arms crossed over its chest and a farming tool in each hand. You hold it like it's fragile, and it is. Not just in the physical sense, but in what it represents. The hope that even in death someone else will carry your burden, that you'll rest. Finally. Here's your fringe fact. The wealthiest Egyptians were buried with hundreds of shabtis, sometimes over 400, each one inscribed with the same standard incantation from the Book of the Dead. And yes, there was an actual Book of the Dead, or rather many versions of it. Scrolls or wall carvings full of hymns, spells, passwords and Jeep's coordinates for the soul. You basically got a magical instruction manual. Assuming you could afford one, you rise again, walking past a small building with a cracked sign painted with symbols. Someone tells you, in broken but kind gestures, that it's the embalmer's quarters. You hesitate, but curiosity wins. Inside, the air is sharp and pungent with natron, the drying salt used to dehydrate bodies, and something sweeter, cloying, almost floral, resin, myrrh, possibly disappointment. There's a body in the centre of the room, wrapped in linen mid-process. Its face is exposed, waxy and distant, lips stiff, eyes sealed forever. You swallow hard. This isn't a museum. This is death in progress. Two men move calmly around the corpse, rapping, packing, whispering prayers. They've done this so many times it's just another craft, another skilled trade passed down from father to son. A small jar on a nearby table catches your eye. It's sealed with a carved lid shaped like a jackal's head. You suddenly remember canopic jars. That's where they keep the organs, stomach, lungs, liver, intestines, each guarded by a different god. The heart, of course, is saved for judgment. You glance back at the wrapped figure, wondering who they were, what they believed, whether they passed the scales or got tossed to Amit like a divine snack. Here's your scholarly debate. Was mummification truly universal or limited to elites? Pop culture would have you believe every Egyptian was lovingly wrapped and entombed, but evidence suggests many commoners were buried in simple pits with a few trinkets and a prayer. Full mummification was extensively natron, linens, oils, funerary texts, and a place to store your body weren't free. Most people got a spiritual approximation of immortality, less preservation, more do your best with what you've got. You look out the embalmer's quarters feeling strange, not scared exactly, more aware. These people lived with death in their pocket. They carried it with them, not as a fear but as a fact, a duty, a destination. You see it now in the way they prepare their homes, their lives, their language. Death wasn't the enemy, it was the next kingdom. Outside, someone's preparing an offering table, a low stone slab with bread, onions and a small jar of beer. Not for a party, for a relative. A small clay tablet nearby bears the name of the departed, etched in careful hand. You're told the man died last year, and they're honouring him today, feeding his soul through symbolic gifts. You ask, through pantomime, if they still feel him nearby. The woman arranging the bread nods solemnly. Always, she says, one of the only words you've understood all day, and just like that, it hits you. For all the talk of gods and spirits, of scales and jackal-headed judges, the heart of Egyptian death is the same as modern mourning. It's about memory, about not being forgotten, about the hope that someone someday will still say your name. You sit down near the offering table, not wanting to intrude but needing a moment. The sun is lower now, casting long shadows that seem to stretch toward the tombs beyond the fields. You've never felt so small or so temporary, but you also feel something else, a strange comfort. Because in this world, the dead are everywhere. They aren't gone. They're part of the rhythm, the stories, the land. They live on in chants, in carvings, in the careful hands of embalmers, and in the simple act of placing bread on a table. In a place obsessed with death, you've never seen so much life wrapped around it. By the time you wander back toward the village centre, you've seen more funerary art, half-wrapped mummies, and organ jars than you ever intended. You tell yourself you need a break, some normalcy, whatever that even looks like here. But then you spot a small gathering near a well, voices raised in a rhythmic pattern that feels different from the usual work chants or religious droning. You drift closer, curiosity tugging at you until you realise what you've walked in on. It's a wedding, at least you think it is. There are no golden rings, no flower crowns or string quartets, but there's definitely a ceremony happening. A young man and woman are standing beside one another, both looking slightly overwhelmed, like they've just realised what eternity actually means. A priest murmurs prayers, pours a libation over a flat stone, and traces symbols in the air. There are garlands of dried lotus flowers, baskets of dates, and everyone is barefoot, which at this point you've stopped questioning entirely. The bride is dressed in a simple but well-draped linen dress, cinched at the waist with a cord of blue beads. Her hair is long and glossy, twisted with tiny gold charms that glint in the low sun. The groom wears a slightly cleaner than usual kilt and has eyeliner thick enough to signal divine approval. Their hands are linked not with a ring, but with a strip of linen that wraps around both wrists. It's subtle, quiet and sacred, in a way that makes modern ceremonies feel like overcompensating. You sit at the edge of the crowd and watch as the couple shares a drink from a clay cup, some mix of beer, water, and probably symbolic spices. They smile, they laugh, someone plays a flute, the crowd claps and cheers, but there's no grand kiss, no sweeping moment of climax. The ritual ends with the simplicity it began with. They're married now, that's it, time to get on with life. Here's your historical fact. Ancient Egyptian marriages were not state-regulated. There were no official ceremonies or licenses. A marriage was legally and socially recognised the moment a couple chose to live together and present themselves as husband and wife. Divorce was legal, surprisingly common, and could be initiated by either partner. Marriage was a social contract, not a religious rite. But love? That's where things get interesting. You've probably heard that the ancient world didn't do romance, that people got married for property, alliances, or sheer survival, but the Egyptians, they were softies. Some of the oldest love poetry in the world comes from here, texts carved into pots and papyri that describe longing, beauty, the thrill of a glance, phrases like, "My heart flutters every time I see you," or "I am your servant, your breath, your shadow." It's sweet, deep, also slightly codependent. But love didn't always equal fidelity. That's where your brow starts to furrow. You notice another man watching the bride with a slightly too long stare. And then you realise he's not hiding it. He nods at her. She smirks. The groom is busy talking with someone else. No one says a word. Interesting. And here comes your fringe fact. Monogamy in ancient Egypt was the social default, but not necessarily the reality. Men, especially those with wealth or status, often had secondary wives or concubines. Women too weren't always perfectly faithful, though the consequences of infidelity were usually harsher for them. What's strange is how casually this all coexisted. Marriage was a cornerstone of society, yes, but love, sex, and desire operated on a parallel track, sometimes intersecting, sometimes not. You follow the couple as the crowd thins and the small reception begins. It's modest, just some shared bread, a few jugs of beer, and what looks like dried figs and roasted fish. People are laughing, trading stories, sneaking kisses behind pottery stacks. No cake, no awkward toasts. No DJ ruining the mood. Just community. You sit on a clay bench, sipping the warm beer someone offers you, and think about relationships here. The average marriage started young, mid-teens for girls, a bit later for boys. Couples often met through family or work, and children came quickly, lots of them. Fertility was considered a divine gift, and many couples prayed to Taure, the hippo-headed goddess of childbirth, for safe deliveries and healthy babies. Her statues are everywhere, ugly, squat, and weirdly comforting. You watch a pair of toddlers wrestle over a ball made of leather and string. Their mother scoops them up, smacks them gently on the back of the head, and sets them down with a muttered prayer, probably for patience or endurance. Here's your scholarly debate of the evening. How much did Egyptian women really control in marriage? Some scholars argue that women had significant rights. They could own property, initiate divorce, make legal contracts, and run businesses. Others caution that while the law might have allowed it, social norms still favoured male dominance, especially outside urban centres. What's clear is that women had more autonomy here than in many other ancient societies, but it still came with limits, expectations, and double standards. As dusk settles, the bride disappears inside her family's home. The groom follows a little later, grinning. No fanfare, just the quiet closing of a reed door behind him. The party continues without them, everyone knowing exactly what comes next and no one making a big deal of it. You sit back, your head buzzing from the beer and the sheer emotional whiplash of the day. Mummification in the morning, marriage by dusk. This place doesn't separate life and death. They're braided together, like the couple's wrists, wrapped in one simple strip of cloth. You think about what it means to love here, to marry someone knowing full well that life is short, that the Nile could flood wrong next season, that childbirth is dangerous, that wounds fester, that gods may or may not intervene. There's no illusion of forever, and maybe that's what makes it feel real. You stare up at the emerging stars, your back pressed against warm stone, and try to imagine yourself in this world long term. Could you love like this? Could you trust like this? Could you live like this? Raw, dusty, and open to every joy and sorrow with equal intensity. You're not sure, but you're starting to understand why these people build tombs for their lovers, write songs to their wives, and craft amulets for fertility out of clay and wishful thinking. Because if death is everywhere, then love is the only real rebellion. You're not even 2 full days into your ancient Egyptian vacation, and you've come to a disturbing realization. You smell terrible. It's not even just the usual mix of sun-scorched sweat and dusty grime anymore. No, you've graduated. You now radiate something more complex, something earthy, herbal, and mildly offensive. It's the smell of someone who's been fermented in clay, marinated in anxiety, and left out too long at room temperature. The people around you are too polite to say anything, but even the goats have started giving you a little more space than usual. You sit under a crooked fig tree, trying to scrape dried sweat from your arms with a strip of woven palm fibre. It helps a little. Mostly, though, it just moves the funk around. You consider dunking yourself into the Nile, but then you remember the crocodiles, the parasites, and the solid chance of getting a one-way ticket to the afterlife via hippo attack. So, no. Nearby, a few women are gathered around a basin, preparing what looks like a paste. They're not cooking, they're mixing something with thick oil, castor maybe, and ashes or charcoal. One of them stirs it slowly with a stick, muttering as she works. Another holds out a jar and dabs a bit of the blackish goop onto her underarm. You squint. Is that deodorant? You shuffle over with the gait of someone who's just spotted salvation. One of the women notices, sizes you up, then pinches her nose in mock horror and hands you a blob of the stuff. It smells strong, pungent, oily, but oddly floral beneath the ash. You rub it on carefully. It tingles. A few seconds later, you almost smell human again. Almost. And here's your historical fact. Ancient Egyptians did, in fact, use primitive forms of deodorant. They experimented with mixtures of fragrant oils, crushed herbs, and even animal fat to reduce body odour. Some recipes included cinnamon, citrus peel, or frankincense. One particularly unique formula was believed to involve cat fat. Yes, cat fat. We're not going to dwell on it. Ancient times were weird. Of course, access to proper hygiene products was largely based on your status. The elite had perfumed oils, imported resins, and private bath spaces in their homes. You're in the ash and hope demographic. You sit back down on your tree root and inhale deeply. You smell like a bonfire that tried to flirt with a flower shop. Still, it's progress. You watch as one of the women starts braiding scented leaves into a necklace, tying it with a scrap of dyed cloth. She offers it to you. You accept gratefully and loop it around your neck. It's not designer, but it beats Oda Pyramid sweat. Now comes your fringe fact. Body odour wasn't just a matter of social etiquette. It had spiritual implications. A pleasant scent was associated with purity and divine favour. Temple rituals often included fumigation with incense, not just to please the gods, but to purify the participants. Stinking too much could be seen as offensive not only to your neighbour, but to the entire cosmological order. So yes, your armpits could theoretically anger a god. You start to wonder what it would take to actually bathe around here. You've seen people splashing water on their faces, dunking feet in jars, even pouring a jug over a child's head while he screams bloody murder. But you haven't seen anything resembling a full bath. You ask around, with hand gestures and hopeful grunts, and someone points you toward a communal washing spot. It's not glamorous. It's basically a muddy patch near a canal, bordered by smooth rocks and half-submerged clay pots filled with water. A few people are already there, scrubbing their skin with bits of cloth, rinsing with one hand while keeping a modesty wrap secure with the other. You find an empty space, crouch low, and begin your version of a shower. It's bracing. The water is cold. Not icy, but cool enough to suck the air out of your lungs. You splash it over your arms, chest, face, neck. You rub your scalp furiously with your fingers, pulling up enough grit to plant crops. The water runs brown, then grey, then sort of beige. You try not to look at it too closely. Someone nearby hands you a lump of what looks like gritty soap. You nod in thanks and scrub. It foams just a little, smells faintly of lime and crushed reeds. You don't ask what's in it. Best not to know. By the time you finish, you're soaked, shivering, and cleaner than you've been since landing in this sun-baked simulation of survival. You sit on a rock and let the sun do its job, drying you with all the subtlety of a blowtorch. And then, because the universe has a sense of humour, a fly immediately lands on your nose. Here's your scholarly debate. Did ancient Egyptians truly value cleanliness as a daily practice? Or was it more about ritual purity for religious contexts? Some scholars argue that regular bathing was common, even expected, with many homes featuring rudimentary wash basins and water jugs. Others think full bathing was reserved for elite classes or specific ceremonial needs. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, clean enough to be presentable, pure enough for prayer but not obsessed with the sparkle. A boy runs past you with a palm fan and smacks a fly mid-flight. He grins and offers the fan to you. You take it, wave it near your face, and for once, feel a breath of true relief. It's not air conditioning, but it's close. As the day heats up again, you realise something. It's not just about getting clean. It's about feeling like yourself again. For all the ritual, all the survival, there's still something deeply human about not smelling like death. About scrubbing off the chaos and returning to something neutral. You wrap yourself in a fresh linen sheet, the one you managed to dry on a nearby rock, and head back into the village, sandals slapping gently on the ground. People pass you without cringing. A woman smiles. A goat sniffs you and doesn't recoil. This, in ancient Egypt, is what passes for a spa day. And while your skin still feels like papyrus, and your nose hairs are probably permanently coated in charcoal, you walk taller now. You smell, if not great, at least like someone trying. You turn a corner and see the temple in the distance, its tall walls catching the early light. Somewhere behind those columns, priests are bathing, purifying, anointing themselves with the sacred oils. You may not have lotus resin or myrrh, but you've got ash paste, a fan, and a linen wrap that isn't currently trying to kill you with heat stroke.
You, my friend, are thriving? Barely.
You've made it nearly 3 full days in ancient Egypt, and your reward is a sunrise so blinding it feels personal. The sky glows like it's been lit from within, orange bleeding into gold, while the sun crests the horizon like a smug overseer, clocking in for another shift of making your life miserable. You squint into it and wonder, for the 100th time, how anyone does anything in this heat, let alone work, pray or survive with even a shred of dignity. As you make your way toward the centre of the village, you pass a man arguing with a scribe over something written on a piece of papyrus. The scribe is unbothered, lazily flicking a fly away with his ink-stained reed pen while the man gestures furiously, pointing at the text, then at a pile of grain sacks. It's clear there's been a mistake, or at least a disagreement. You don't catch every word, but you do catch the tone, and one word that echoes like a slap, wrong. The scribe says it quietly, but with weight. The kind of weight that makes everyone within earshot stop moving for half a second. And in that pause, you get it. Making a mistake here isn't just embarrassing. It's dangerous. You keep walking slowly now, chewing on the realization that this isn't just a culture of ritual and rhythm. It's a place where getting something wrong, especially in writing or speech, can wreck your life. Here's your historical fact. In ancient Egypt, the spoken and written word held immense power. The entire cosmos, according to their beliefs, was ordered through divine utterance. What the gods spoke became law. That translated into daily life with a seriousness around language that most modern people can't begin to imagine. Scribes weren't just bureaucrats, they were oracles with ink. Writing the wrong symbol could mean misreporting land ownership, misinterpreting a temple offering, or calling down the wrong god. And saying the wrong thing aloud, that could get you punished, shunned, or, in extreme cases, whipped. Now you're sweating not from the heat, but from the sudden understanding that every attempt you've made to communicate has probably been a disaster. How many times have you said thank you with the wrong inflection? Or weven with the wrong hand? Or pointed at something with a gesture that might, in this culture, mean, I hope your goats fall ill. You recall the old woman who handed you the weird soup on day 1. You nodded and said something in English. She smiled. But now you wonder, was that smile polite? Pitying? Was she just counting the days until the gods smote you for your clumsy tongue? You glance around nervously, suddenly hyper-aware that you're surrounded by language you don't speak, read, or even fake well. And here's the twist. Hieroglyphs aren't an alphabet. They're not even a full writing system the way you think of one. They're a chaotic mix of phonetic signs, logograms, and determinatives. Tiny pictograms that change meaning based on context, placement, and divine mood swings. A duck doesn't always mean duck. Sometimes it means sun or great. Or maybe it's just decorative. Good luck. You pass a small schoolroom, a shaded courtyard where a few children are huddled around a low table while a scribe instructs them. He holds up a tablet and points to a series of symbols. The children repeat them, some confidently, others in muttered confusion. The scribe raps one on the knuckles with a reed and makes him repeat it again. Louder. You watch, fascinated. This is how scribes are made. Years of rote memorization, perfecting hundreds of symbols, each one just slightly more complicated than the last. You try to trace a few symbols in the dust with your finger. A feather, a squiggle, a horned viper. They don't look like anything. They look like what a toddler might carve into wet cement and call art. You wipe them away before anyone sees. Here's your fringe fact. Mispronouncing a keyword during a ritual, especially a funerary one, could, in theory, doom the soul of the deceased. That's how serious they were about accuracy. There are entire texts, like the Book of the Dead, that include backup spells in case the original incantations were spoken incorrectly. Literal divine do-overs. You remember something from the temple a day ago. A priest chanting, his words slow and deliberate. Not bored, not lazy. Careful. Each word was measured, weighed, and dropped like a stone into the spiritual pond. Every vibration mattered. That's because in this world language isn't just a means of communication. It's a tool of control, a form of magic. Say it right and the gods listen. Say it wrong and who knows what you summon. You stop at a small stall where a woman is selling charms carved with inscriptions. You see an ankh, a scarab, the eye of Horus. You point to one shaped like a lotus flower. She picks it up and says something. You nod, not understanding a word. She raises an eyebrow, waits. You stammer something, probably an accidental insult, and she bursts out laughing, not cruelly, just amused. She hands you the charm anyway, accepts a copper bead in trade, and waves you off like a well-meaning child who just tried to recite poetry and ended up ordering donkey stew. You wear the charm anyway. You don't know what it says, but it's probably keep the flies off this one. As you wander back toward the riverbank, your head spins with all the unspoken rules you're breaking. You pass a man who calls out to you, you wave, he frowns. Did you just agree to marry his cousin, offer to duel him, invite him to dinner at a non-existent house? You smile and shuffle away, hoping your face says never mind. Here's your scholarly debate. How widely was hieroglyphic knowledge actually distributed? Some argue that literacy was limited almost entirely to the scribal class, with less than 1% of the population able to read and write. Others point out that simpler scripts like hieratic and demotic were more common in everyday use, meaning merchants, priests, and some artisans may have had functional literacy. But either way, the ability to read sacred texts was a gatekeeping mechanism, knowledge reserved for the initiated. You sit down near the water, too tired to keep worrying about your accidental heresies. A bird squawks overhead, and a breeze lifts the edge of your linen wrap. You stare at your charm, trying to convince yourself it says something good. Strength, maybe, or wisdom, or nice try. For now, you don't speak the language. You don't understand the rules. You're fumbling through a world that requires precision, respect, and rhythm you haven't yet learned. But somehow the villagers tolerate you. They don't exile you or throw you to the crocodiles. They laugh, correct you, and keep moving. Maybe they know what you don't. That even in a society obsessed with the order, there's still space for the occasional mess-up, so long as you mean well. You lie back on the warm stone and close your eyes, letting the wind carry your thoughts. The words might escape you for now, but the meaning? That you're starting to feel. You hear the scratching before you see it, the soft scrape of reed pen on papyrus, rhythmic and fast, like someone weaving sound into silence. You follow the noise, your curiosity dragging your feet toward a shaded alcove off the village square, where the heat slouches but doesn't sleep. There, tucked beneath a canopy of palm fronds and linen, is a scribe, young, precise, and terrifyingly focused. He doesn't even look up as you arrive. He's surrounded by scrolls, tablets, and little jars of black and red ink that shimmer in the low light like ancient blood. His fingers are stained to the knuckles. You imagine if you cut him open, ink would pour out instead of blood. You settle on a nearby bench, trying to look inconspicuous, which is laughable. You've been here long enough to know you stand out like a goose among falcons. Pale, awkward, slightly sunburned, and always 5 seconds away from saying something culturally catastrophic. Still, the scribe says nothing. He writes. You watch as symbols unfold under his hand, small birds, jagged lines, loops, gods, lions, arms, eyes. They look alive somehow, like the page itself is breathing. You're not sure whether to be impressed or afraid. You lean closer and get your first glimpse of a document in the making, an inventory. He's recording grain, lots of it. Column after column of sacks accounted for, harvest dates, quantities, temple allocations, debts. It's like an Excel spreadsheet, if Excel came with a curse for every miscalculation. And here's your historical fact. Scribes were the power behind the papyrus. In a society where nearly no one could read or write, the scribe class held enormous influence. They recorded everything: crop yields, taxes, births, rituals, court decisions, and royal decrees. Without them, the state didn't function. They were walking databases in linen kilts, and their mistakes could change lives. Being a scribe wasn't just a profession, it was a divine calling. The young man finally acknowledges you. Just a flick of the eyes, a momentary arch of one eyebrow, as if to say, "You're still breathing? Impressive." You nod, gesturing vaguely toward his tools. He lifts his reed pen with a faint smile and hands it over. You hold it like a baby bird. It's lighter than you expect, stiff but smooth. Its nib cut to a point so sharp you're surprised it doesn't count as a weapon. You mimic his writing posture, dip the pen into the ink jar, and promptly smear a blob onto your hand. He sighs, patiently. You try again, slower. You scratch a line onto a spare bit of papyrus he's tossed your way. It looks like someone tried to draw a duck mid-earthquake. You hold it up. He doesn't laugh, but his mouth twitches like laughter is knocking. He takes the sheet back, scribbles something next to your attempt, and shows you your duck means sun, but it's missing the stroke that tells readers you're not, say, trying to draw an actual duck. That's the trick, you realise. Egyptian writing isn't just visual, it's layered. Every symbol carries phonetic, literal and symbolic meanings, and the difference between them depends on small, nearly invisible details. You could write heart and accidentally say shovel. You could praise someone's courage and wind up calling their mother a donkey. You manage a few more strokes. He offers you a nod. Not approval exactly, but acknowledgement that you didn't actively insult the gods this time. Then he goes back to work, leaving you to sit in his silent temple of ink and wonder. Here's your fringe fact. Scribes often carried a wooden palette with 2 ink pots, red and black. Black was for standard text, red was for emphasis, names of gods, section headings, corrections or curses. And yes, there were curses. Scribal curses were sometimes inscribed in tombs or official texts to ward off thieves or plagiarists. One common version reads, "May he who defaces this suffer pestilence, blindness, and the wrath of Thoth." So, like consequences. You think about Thoth, the ibis-headed god of writing and wisdom. He's everywhere in scribe culture, often shown with a pen and scroll, recording the deeds of the dead at the final judgment. You start to understand why scribes were treated with such respect. They weren't just record keepers, they were gatekeepers of the afterlife. In a world built on order, they defined truth with every stroke. The young man's mentor appears, a wiry, older scribe with deep lines carved into his face like topography. He glances at your papyrus, snorts softly, then says something to the younger man you don't understand. It probably translates to, "Don't let this one near the ledgers." You accept this as fair, you stand and bow slightly, handing the reed pen back with more reverence than you gave it. The scribe accepts it with a short nod, already moving on to another sheet. You've seen enough. You're leaving with more questions than answers, but one thing is clear, this is where power lives, not in muscle, not in gold, but in the quiet scratch of pen on paper, the kind that can build temples or erase people entirely. Here's your scholarly debate. Were scribes truly neutral, or were they instruments of elite control? Some historians argue that scribes were bureaucratic middlemen, faithfully recording without bias. Others point to evidence of manipulation, land records that favoured temple estates, tax ledgers that lost certain names, and propaganda texts inscribed into public walls. In truth, they were both. Devoted professionals and dangerous assets. Tools of the state with just enough literacy to reshape it. You step out of the scribe's alcove and back into the afternoon sun, your eyes needing a second to adjust after the dark quiet of the ink-filled cave. The sounds of life return all at once. Vendors yelling, donkeys braying, pottery clanking. But your mind is still on the papyrus. The power it holds. The way one symbol could mean life or death. You walk a little straighter now and you watch your words more carefully. Even if you can't say them right, you know they matter. And in a place where the wrong phrase could get you cursed or worse, that knowledge might be the most valuable thing earned all day. You pass a wall scrawled with faded red ink. A prayer? A warning? A recipe? You don't know. But you nod at it just the same, just in case. You're minding your own business, just walking through the market, sweating into places you didn't know had sweat glands, when you feel it. The unsettling, slow-burn sensation of being watched. Not just casual hey new guy glances. No, this is different. This feels spiritual, mythological, like something ancient has just fixed its gaze on you and is quietly judging your every life choice. You stop, look around. That's when you see it. A cat. Not just any cat. This one is perched like royalty on the edge of a low temple wall, its fur immaculate despite the dust swirling everywhere. Its eyes the colour of judgment itself. It doesn't blink. It doesn't move. It just stares, like it knows you haven't paid proper tribute today, or ever. Then you notice the other animals. A long-tailed monkey sitting lazily under a date tree, licking juice off its fingers. An ibis wading in a muddy ditch, head tilted sideways as if eavesdropping. A dog with one ear twitching in your direction, watching like it's memorizing your soul. You're surrounded by creatures that don't act like animals. They act like witnesses. Because here in ancient Egypt, they kind of are. Here's your historical fact. The ancient Egyptians didn't just like animals. They revered them, worshipped them, saw divine energy within them. Many of their gods were depicted with animal heads or forms. Bastet, the goddess of home and protection, had the head of a lioness or cat. Thoth, the god of wisdom, was an ibis. Sobek, god of strength and fertility, was a crocodile. Even the cow, usually seen as lunch in most ancient cultures, was sacred here, linked to Hathor, the goddess of motherhood and joy. You sit on a stone ledge near the market and watch as someone brings a tray of bread to a small shrine. It's not a god's altar, it's a cat shrine. 3 cats, in fact, sit nearby, tails flicking, eyes gleaming, and one of them swats at the bread like it knows it's a divine offering. The woman bows slightly and murmurs something before walking away. You blink. Did you just witness someone give a snack to a literal deity? Yes, you did. And here's your fringe fact. Egypt once had entire cemeteries devoted to animal mummies. Cats, dogs, ibises, baboons, falcons, you name it. In some temples, animals were bred specifically for ritual sacrifice and mummification. Pilgrims bought them, like souvenirs, offerings to appease their chosen gods. Some were carefully embalmed. Others, well, let's just say some mummified cats turned out to be bundled up sticks. Divine scams were alive and well. You wander through the market again, now hyper-aware of every bird, insect, and mammal nearby. Every creature feels loaded with symbolism. Even the flies that keep dive-bombing your forehead. Are they messengers of Seth, the god of chaos? Or are they just jerks? You pass a man painting tiny images on shards of pottery. Not people, animals, cats, birds, jackals. He lines them up neatly beside his stall. You pick up one and examine the image of Anubis, jackal-headed guardian of the dead. His eyes are sharp, his posture regal, and the detail is stunning. You point to it, offer a token from your dwindling pouch of trade goods, and the man nods. You now own a divine dog shard. It's probably cursed, but who knows, it might balance out your current bad luck. You find a quiet corner near a granary and sit beneath a low fig tree. A lizard skitters across your foot and pauses, blinking at you like it has something to say. You resist the urge to ask it for life advice. You're tired, sure, but not that tired. Someone nearby is singing, slow, rhythmic and strange. The song's about a cow. You listen closer. It's not a joke. The lyrics describe the cow as mother of stars, giver of life, bearer of sky. You realise it's a hymn to Hathor, the celestial cow goddess who literally carried the sun across the heavens on her back. That's another layer of Egypt you hadn't fully grasped until now. The animal forms aren't metaphor. They're sacred realities. When someone looks at a lion here, they don't just see strength. They see Sekhmet, goddess of war. A vulture isn't just a scavenger, it's Nekhbet, protector of Upper Egypt. Even the humble dung beetle has a place of honour, symbolising the god Khepri, who rolls the sun across the sky each day like a divine cosmic poop ball. Here's your scholarly debate. Did the Egyptians truly believe their gods took animal form? Or were these images symbolic? Ways to convey qualities like speed, strength, or cunning? Some scholars argue that it was practical mythology. Others believe it was deeply literal. But the truth seems to be that for the Egyptians, symbolism was reality. There was no hard line between animal and god, metaphor and matter. If you saw a crocodile, you didn't just see danger, you saw the divine, with teeth. A young boy runs past, chasing a cat with a reed toy. The cat glances over its shoulder, then flicks its tail and vanishes into an alleyway like it's late for a priestly meeting. No one scolds the boy, but a woman nearby shakes her head. You catch one word from her murmur. Careful. It's a warning, not a correction. You begin to understand animals aren't just part of nature here, they're part of order. Mahat, the sacred balance of the universe, includes humans, gods, animals, and the land. It's all woven together, a tapestry where even a mouse can tip the scale of cosmic justice. So yeah, step on a frog at the wrong time and you might be punished by a crocodile god 3 generations from now. You pocket your Anubis shard and head back toward the village. A monkey tries to grab it. You smack his hand gently. He screeches and runs. You hope that wasn't a divine test. You're not sure how well you'd score on the Don't Steal from the Monkey God exam. As you round a corner, the temple looms in the distance, its columns etched with birds and bulls, falcons and serpents. You suddenly feel very, very small. Not just physically, but cosmically. You're a visitor in a world where even a stray cat might be a messenger from Bastet, and your half-rotted sandals are probably offending someone in the spiritual chain of command. You find a stone near the temple and sit, watching a procession of ibis walk in single file across the path. One stops, looks at you, and then, with great ceremony, poops. Divine judgment has been delivered. You've officially given up on understanding how time works in ancient Egypt. You're not sure if it's day or evening, if you're hungry or dehydrated, or whether that distant pounding in your ears is a heartbeat or the drums from yet another temple ritual. There's no clock tower, no bells, no glow from a smartphone screen telling you it's 4:37 p.m. and you should have eaten lunch an hour ago. Here, time is marked by sun and shadow, the smell of baking bread and how many flies are currently orbiting your head like aggressive satellites. Still, something shifts in the air, subtle but definite. You can feel it in your skin and in the rhythm of the village. People are moving differently, slower, more deliberate. It's not just the heat, it's anticipation. Something's happening, or about to happen. You follow the flow of feet toward the temple. The crowd gathers outside its massive entrance, rows of towering columns, each one carved with gods, kings, and something that looks suspiciously like an oversized beetle throwing a party. Priests in crisp white linen glide past, bare feet slapping the warm stone. Their heads are shaved, their expressions unreadable, their hands busy arranging baskets of offerings. Bread, flowers, chunks of dried meat, fruits you can't name. Someone near you whispers, "Festival," that's all you get. One word, but it's enough. Here's your historical fact. Ancient Egypt was a civilization of festivals, dozens of them. Some seasonal, some regional, many tied to specific gods or agricultural milestones. These weren't just parties, they were cosmic resets. By honouring the gods with food, music and ritual, the people reaffirm Ma'at, the sacred order of the universe. And yes, some of them included parades, dancing and beer. Lots of beer. The temple doors creak open, not the tiny wooden ones you're imagining, but massive slabs that grind apart with a sound like thunder. The crowd presses forward, held in check by a thin line of guards wielding nothing but sharp looks and sharp sticks. You hang back, sensing that being trampled at a holy celebration would be a very on-brand way for your visit to end. Then the music starts. Not music like you're used to, no chords, no melody you can hum. It's all rhythm and vibration. Drums, sistrums, those rattling metal frame instruments shaped like temple doorways, and deep, sonorous chanting that seems to rise from the ground itself. It hits you in the chest first, then the spine, Then somewhere between your ribs where your doubt lives, whatever they're doing is not performance, it's participation. A golden statue emerges, carried on a palanquin by 6 sweating men. It's the god Amun, or maybe Horus. You can't quite tell, but he's gleaming and terrifying. With eyes that seem to look through time, the priests bow, the people cheer, flowers are thrown, incense is lit, smoke curls upward like a ghost returning home. You stay near the back, watching as the procession winds through the village, dancers spinning in slow hypnotic movements, their faces painted, their feet moving in practiced, perfect unison. Children dart between legs, old women chant prayers, someone offers you a lotus blossom, fragrant, soft, possibly sacred. You tuck it behind your ear like you've been doing this your whole life. And here's your fringe fact. Some Egyptian festivals were so wild that ancient documents complained about the chaos. The beautiful Festival of the Valley was one such celebration, held annually in Thebes, where gods were taken out of their temples to visit other shrines and necropolises. There were feasts, drunken singing, and even rumours of secret nighttime rituals. Some scholars believe fertility rites were involved. Others argue it was just the ancient version of spring break. You follow the parade as it loops back toward the temple. Along the way, vendors set up impromptu stalls. Nothing fancy, just baskets of figs, dates soaked in honey, and small cups of beer passed from hand to hand. You're offered one and take it. It's warm, slightly sour. But after a day of sun, sand, and divine judgment by ibis, it's the closest thing to bliss you've felt in days. As the procession returns to the temple, the statue is placed on a high pedestal. The priests chant a final invocation, their voices rising in crescendo. Then silence, a deep collective inhale. The crowd waits, and then one of the priests pulls a curtain back, revealing the sacred bark. The god's boat, a richly carved structure inlaid with gold shaped like a crescent moon. It's purely ceremonial, not seaworthy in the slightest, but symbolically it carries the god through the sky, across the heavens and through the underworld. It's a divine Uber. The crowd erupts in cheers, the music resumes, people clap, hug, shout blessings to the sky. You stand there dumbfounded, holding a half-eaten fig and a very squishy piece of bread, completely caught between awe and confusion. Here's your scholarly debate. Were these festivals truly joyful for the masses, or controlled propaganda designed to reinforce power? Some historians see them as emotional, spontaneous celebrations, deep expressions of belief and community. Others note how tightly the priesthood managed the rituals, the symbolism, the pacing, and argue that it was all about control, keeping the public inspired and in check. The truth? Maybe both. Joy is powerful, and power loves a captive audience. The sun begins to set, painting the sky in shades of copper and blood. The incense smoke thickens, drifting over the temple like a veil. People begin to disperse, full of food, drink, and divine energy. The god returns to his sanctuary, the doors close, and the music fades. You're left standing at the edge of the temple square, lotus behind your ear, beer on your breath, the taste of honey still on your tongue, and a strong sense that you've just survived something important. Maybe not in the epic battle sense, but in the way you survive being near something bigger than you, something ancient, something sacred. You walk back through the village under a sky full of stars, every footstep crunching softly on sand and memory. A cat brushes against your leg. A priest murmurs a blessing. Somewhere in the distance, someone begins singing again, and you realise time does work here. Just not how you expect. It's cyclical, ritual, measured not in minutes, but in meaning. And tonight you've got just enough of that to make it to morning. You wake up to music again, but this time it's different, softer, slower. Like the air itself has taken a deep breath and decided to relax for once. The drums from yesterday's festival are gone, and in their place is a kind of hush, broken only by the rhythmic plucking of a lyre and the low steady hum of someone singing just under their breath. You're still curled up on your roof mat, lotus flower dried to a crisp near your ear, and you feel oddly peaceful for a place that normally treats you like a chew toy. Below, the village moves in a gentler rhythm today. Children chase each other without quite so much screaming. The usual barked orders from artisans and farmers have been replaced with conversation. Even the goats seem less judgmental. Something's shifted. You feel it before anyone explains it. Today is a rest day. And yes, even ancient Egyptians knew when to take a break. You descend the stairs and stretch, your joints cracking like old papyrus. Your feet still ache, but at least the festering threat of infection seems to be backing off. A woman in the street hands you a slice of something flat and sweet. Fig cake, you think, and pats your shoulder like you've passed some invisible test. She doesn't speak, just smiles. You get the feeling she knows you're barely holding it together, but she's rooting for you anyway. Here's your historical fact. While the Egyptians didn't have a weekend like we know it, they did have designated rest periods tied to the lunar calendar, temple rituals, and festival cycles. Certain days were marked as unlucky for work, called evil days, where labour was avoided and spiritual reflection or ritual cleansing took priority. Others were simply feast days, when temples fed the people and celebrations paused the usual grind. You sit with a group of villagers under a palm canopy where someone's playing that lyre, an instrument made of wood and gut, strung tight and humming like an insect in slow motion. You listen, head tilted, as the player sings in a language you don't understand but somehow feel. It's about the Nile, maybe, or love, or both. Probably both. These people are nothing if not romantically attached to everything around them. Nearby, a man begins to recite something, a story judging by the way the crowd leans in. His hands move with the words, drawing shapes in the air. You can't catch much, but the occasional phrase jumps out, repeated like a chorus. He crossed the desert, the moon watched, she opened the door. You're transfixed, even without knowing what's going on. It's like watching a dream being performed in real time. Here's your fringe fact. Storytelling in ancient Egypt wasn't just entertainment, it was a sacred act. Many tales were written down, like the tale of the shipwrecked sailor, or the story of Sinuhe, but most stories were told aloud, passed down from mouth to mouth like heirlooms. They often mix myth and morality, history and exaggeration, wrapped in metaphor and rhythm. A good storyteller could command an entire village. You get drawn into one such tale mid-afternoon, seated cross-legged beside a shady wall while a group of children and elders gather. The storyteller is older than stone, with teeth like weathered ivory and hands that wave like they're casting spells. He tells of a fisherman who angers Sobek, the crocodile god, and must perform 7 impossible tasks to win back his freedom. There are riddles, monsters, magical cats of course, and a boat made entirely of lotus petals. It's thrilling, confusing, and weirdly emotional. You're sure you missed the main moral, but you clap anyway. Everyone does. You eat with them. Roasted onions, lentil stew, dried figs, and more beer than is probably wise. It's not a feast like the festival yesterday, but it feels just as important. Like the day was designed for nourishment, not just of the body, but of the soul. And here's your scholarly debate. Did everyday Egyptians live lives full of leisure and culture? Or were these moments rare and reserved for the wealthy? Some argue that average workers had very little free time, grinding through dawn to dusk labour with little relief. But archaeological finds, musical instruments in modest homes, painted games, even graffiti, suggest a different story. That joy was a priority, even in the margins. That celebration of music and laughter weren't luxuries, but necessities. Later you're invited to a game, a real game. Not survival, not guess what part of your body is infected, but a board game. The slab is simple, rectangular, carved into squares, with a few pebbles and markers placed just so. You recognise it instantly. You've seen it in museums and glass cases behind thick ropes. Senet, one of the oldest known board games in human history. And here they're just playing it like it's Monopoly on a rainy afternoon. You get schooled immediately. A boy half your age beats you 3 times in a row, barely even trying. You suspect he's part oracle. The crowd laughs, not cruelly, but with the kind of affection you didn't expect to find in a place so old, so sacred, so carved in stone. Maybe this is the secret. Maybe the games and the music and the storytelling are the resistance against death, decay, and the endless weight of survival. As the sun dips low, the village glows with firelight. No ceremonies tonight, no gods demanding attention, just people resting, breathing, living. You lie back on the roof again, full from lentils, fuzzy from beer, and warmed by the kind of simple joy you thought you'd lost in the whirlwind of temples, plagues, and prophetic animals. A woman nearby hums something soft and sweet. You feel the rhythm of the Nile in the distance, the steady, eternal, and for the first time you realise you're not just surviving this anymore. You're participating. Not well, not expertly, but sincerely. And here that counts. The air is cooler than usual this morning, cool being a relative term, of course. You're still sticky, still gritty, but there's something else clinging to the breeze now. A tension, a hum, like the village has collectively held its breath and is waiting for someone, or something, to exhale. You rise slowly from your rooftop mat, bones crackling, and glance around. People are up already, not frantically, not with the bustle of a market day or festival prep, but with a kind of urgent reverence. They move like they're walking across sacred ground, even if all they're doing is carrying water jars and bread baskets. Then someone says it, a word that cuts the morning air like flint striking stone. Audit. You pause, look around. Several villagers nearby nod grimly, murmuring the word again like a spell or a curse. And then you understand. Today the officials from the central government are visiting. The bureaucrats, the counters, the record keepers, the ones who wear crisp linen and smell like wax tablets, and bad intentions. Today is inspection day. And here's your historical fact. Ancient Egypt ran on bureaucracy. It wasn't all pyramids and prayers. It was grain quotas, cattle counts, labour logs, and taxes tallied down to the jar. Pharaohs didn't just rule by divine will, they ruled by administrative spreadsheets written in ink. Every village, every failed and every seen told was part of a colossal machine fueled by scribes, overseers, and government agents. They visited regularly to make sure everyone was paying what they owed and working as they should. And if something didn't add up, let's just say there were consequences. You spot them before you're fully prepared. A line of them moving like a ripple of starched authority through the streets. Their kilts are stiff, their expressions tighter than your sore calves. At least 2 of them carry writing palettes, red and black ink jars dangling from their belts like threats. One man leads the group, face perfectly blank, hands clasped behind his back. He's not here to make friends. He's here to count, to measure, to judge. You try to shrink into the background, which is impossible, of course. You're still the out-of-place visitor with weird sandals and a sunburned nose. But you lower your head, keep moving, and pretend to be as busy as possible with absolutely nothing. A crowd gathers in the granary. Inside, you peek in as the officials begin their work. They're efficient, precise, and devastatingly humorless. One opens a clay jar, dips a measuring tool inside, notes the grain level, and moves on. Another checks tally marks carved into the wall, comparing them to what's recorded on his papyrus sheet. A third demands to know why 2 of the storage jars don't match their records. The headman of the village, normally calm and confident, is suddenly sweating through his robe. And here's your fringe fact. There were entire ranks of government agents devoted to auditing and record-keeping. Titles like Overseer of the Granary, Controller of the Marshlands, and even Chief of the Smell of the Divine Chamber existed. Bureaucracy was so embedded in Egyptian life that many tomb inscriptions brag not about heroism or glory, but about administrative accuracy. He kept perfect accounts. No one complained of him. You follow the inspectors as they make their rounds. They examine tools, question workers, and sniff suspiciously at offerings laid out at the local shrine. One of them even tests a measuring rod against the village's wall to see if anyone's tried to sneak in unauthorized expansion. Spoiler alert, someone has. The owner is dragged into the center of the square, where he stammers excuses while the inspectors confer in low voices. Eventually, they mark something on a scroll. The man's head drops. You don't know what the punishment will be, reduced rations, extra labour, a fine, but everyone around seems to know. It's quiet, heavy. And here's your scholarly debate. Was ancient Egypt's bureaucratic system efficient and fair, or oppressive and corrupt? Some scholars argue that it was remarkably organised for its time, with well-kept records and clear lines of authority. Others point to examples of bribery, inflated counts, and abuses of power, especially when scribes or officials were far from major urban centres. The truth likely lived somewhere in the tension, between order and exploitation, between ma'at and survival. You duck away from the procession and find a quiet spot near the edge of the village. A few women are whispering, glancing anxiously toward their homes. One clutches a small clay jar to her chest. She notices you watching and raises an eyebrow. "Papyrus," she says simply, then taps the jar. You realise what's happening. She's hiding her tax records. Or maybe a surplus she wasn't supposed to keep. You look around, no one's watching. You nod once and she darts into a nearby doorway, slipping the jar inside a woven basket and covering it with reeds. You don't feel heroic. You feel complicit. But in this world, that's survival. Later the officials leave, walking back down the main road with the same stiff authority they arrived with. No goodbyes, no thank yous, just a trail of dust and a village exhaling so hard it might collapse in on itself. You wander back toward the granary. The headman is there, talking to a few villagers, checking the damage. Some minor fines, some warnings. One family will have to give up an extra goat next month. Not devastating, but not painless either. He sees you, nods. For the first time you feel like you understand him, not as a leader, not as a character in a history book, but as a man stuck between two crushing forces, the state and his people, trying to keep the balance, trying to hold the line. You leave him there in the fading sun and head back to your rooftop. As you climb, a young boy runs past, holding up a drawing on papyrus. It's a crude sketch of one of the inspectors, except with a donkey's head. You snort. He grins. Somewhere in this ancient machine, resistance lives on in jokes and secret drawings. You settle onto your mat, exhausted not by labour but by observation. You've seen power at work today, not divine, not heroic, just paperwork, carried out with terrifying precision, and it reminds you of something you've been trying to forget. Surviving isn't just about staying fed, it's about staying uncounted, unnoticed, outside the lines drawn by people with ink and no soul. You close your eyes as the wind shifts. Somewhere out there, another village is about to be audited. Another family is burying their papyrus in the dirt. And you're just trying to breathe between the lines. You open your eyes the next morning to the sound of shouting, not the angry kind, thankfully, but the enthusiastic, something weird is happening and we must all gawk at it kind. You roll off your mat, limbs creaking like poorly oiled hinges, and peek over the edge of the rooftop. The streets are alive with energy. Not fear, not panic, curiosity. People are pouring toward the riverbank in a slow jostling wave, and even the goats are trotting in that direction like they don't want to miss the action. So naturally, you follow. Your sandals slap against the packed earth as you jog to keep up. The sun's barely climbed above the horizon, but it's already searing everything in its path. You arrive breathless at the banks of the Nile, and are immediately hit with the sharp scent of river mud, fish and something. Sweet? Strange. There's a cluster of boats tied together near the shallows. Sleek wooden things, papyrus rafts, even a half-rotted bark that looks more decorative than functional. But it's what's on the boats that draws the crowd. Cargo. Not grain, not beer, not goats. Something else. Boxes, scrolls, crates sealed with wax. And sitting cross-legged atop a woven mat under a linen canopy, fanning herself with a palm frond like the queen of everything, is a woman unlike any you've seen here so far. She's dressed richly, but not gaudily. Dark linen robes edged in gold thread, with jewellery that gleams even in the dusty dawn light. Her hair is braided and coiled into a structure that must have taken a team effort, and her eyeliner is so sharp it could be used to carve hieroglyphs. She watches the crowd with a small amused smile, as though she's seen this all before and is quietly deciding whether or not it's worth her time. She is unmistakably someone important, and not from here. Someone whispers her title, Neset, a royal official, a noble woman, possibly a priestess, possibly all three, and here's your historical fact. Ancient Egypt's bureaucracy included high-ranking women, especially in religious institutions. Priestesses of Hathor and Isis held significant power, overseeing temple operations, managing land, and even participating in royal decision-making. Nobles, male and female, often travelled between regions to oversee trade, investigate disputes, or conduct ceremonial duties on behalf of the state. The woman, Neset, raises her hand, and the crowd parts like water around a stone. She steps off the boat with the grace of someone who has never once stubbed a toe. Several attendants trail behind her, carrying scrolls, baskets of offerings, and what looks like a travel-sized altar. This isn't a casual visit, this is official business. You shuffle backward, trying to blend into the crowd, but one of her guards catches your eye. He squints. You freeze. Then, to your horror, he gestures to you. Just a little flick of his fingers, but it may as well be a thunderclap. A few nearby villagers give you the side eye as you step forward, clearly wondering how the sweaty outsider got himself summoned by a woman who probably bathes in flower petals. You approach carefully. Nesette turns to look at you fully for the first time, and her smile widens just a fraction. Not cruel, not kind, just curious. "Foreign?" she asks in perfect, unhurried Egyptian. You nod, stunned that she's speaking to you at all. "Still alive?" she adds. You nod again, and a few people nearby snort with laughter. She tilts her head, examining you like an unusual bug on a windowsill. Then she gestures for her attendants to begin unloading the cargo. You're released, apparently, but something in her expression lingers, like she's filed you away for later. You step aside and watch as crates are opened and their contents displayed for inspection. Textiles, jars of perfume, bundles of papyrus, carved figurines, and spices that make your nose tingle. This isn't just a visit. It's an inspection and a marketplace rolled into one. Nesette is here to trade, to take account, and to see. And here's your fringe fact. The Nile wasn't just a river. It was the superhighway of ancient Egypt. Boats moved goods, news, people and gossip from the delta to Nubia. Mobile officials like Nesette were critical to maintaining the web of state control. Some travelled with their own scribes, guards, and even portable shrines to conduct rituals while on the move. The state didn't just exist in palaces, it floated. As the sun climbs higher, Nesette sits beneath her canopy, accepting visitors. Farmers, artisans, even priests approach with gifts, petitions, or reports. She listens, says little, occasionally marks something on a wax tablet or murmurs to her scribe. It's a performance of quiet power, and everyone knows their place in it. You watch as a dispute is presented, two men arguing over a shared irrigation channel. Nesette doesn't scold, doesn't threaten. She simply listens, asks one question, then glances at her scribe who nods. Verdict delivered. The loser bows and walks away, grumbling but accepting. Justice, Nile style. Here's your scholarly debate. How autonomous were provincial officials in ancient Egypt? Some argue that they were tightly managed by the central government, bound by strict laws and overseen by royal agents. Others believe local rulers, especially in wealthy regions, had wide latitude to interpret laws, settle disputes, and even commission local building projects. Nesette's calm authority suggests the latter. She's not waiting on a letter from the capital. She is the letter. Late in the day, you pass her canopy again. She's resting now, reclining on a low couch while an attendant fans her lazily. She sees you and raises an eyebrow. "Still here?" she asks. You shrug. She chuckles softly. "Try not to die before sunset. You're mildly interesting." You've never been more honoured by a backhanded compliment in your life. As evening approaches, Nesette and her entourage begin to repack the boats. She accepts final tributes, baskets of figs, a carved falcon, a small golden charm, and boards her vessel without fanfare. The crowd watches as she drifts away, a silhouette framed by the sun's reflection on the water. The village exhales, and you stand there realizing you just witnessed something that didn't involve gods, death, or dismemberment. It was just power, quiet, composed, and as unshakable as the Nile itself. You turn back toward the village, the river breeze at your back, and think, if you weren't going to survive here, Nesette would have already had you tossed to the crocodiles. So that's something. Night falls heavy, thick with heat and the musky scent of the river. But it's not quiet, not tonight. There's shouting in the distance, low at first, like thunder grumbling on the edge of the horizon, then louder, rising, splintered with urgency. You jolt awake on your rooftop mat, heart slamming, instinctively ducking lower behind a row of clay pots. It's not a festival, it's not singing. You know the difference now. This sound is panic, and it's getting closer. You throw on your linen wrap and scramble down the steps into the courtyard. The village is moving, fast and disorganized, like a body trying to run with its head still spinning. People are shouting warnings, doors slam, children are being pulled into homes. Some are holding oil lamps, others torches, and the glow casts strange, flickering shadows across the walls. You grab a stranger by the arm, someone you vaguely recognize from the granary, and ask what's going on. He just says one word, fire, and then takes off running. You follow him toward the edge of the village, where a blur of orange light pulses just beyond the trees. It isn't just one hut. It's 3, maybe 4, all made of the same flammable materials. thatch, reeds, dry timber, sun-baked for weeks. Flames leap like dancers against the black sky. Their crackle drowned beneath the sound of shouting and splashing. People are already forming lines from the canal, passing clay jars and baskets, anything that can hold water. It's chaos, but organised chaos. You jump into the line without thinking, arms aching with each passed jar. The water is warm, muddy, and mostly ineffective, but it's something. You can feel the heat even from here, scorching your skin, stinging your eyes. Embers swirl past and you swat them away, praying the wind doesn't shift toward the densely packed centre of the village. Here's your historical fact. Fire was one of the greatest fears in ancient Egyptian settlements, especially in small towns made of mud brick and dry plant materials. Open flame was everywhere. Torches, oil lamps, cooking fires, and the risk was constant. There were no fire departments, no alarms, just neighbours, buckets, and luck. If a blaze spread too far, it could erase a village in a single night. People yell names, trying to locate family members, friends, livestock. One man plunges into the edge of the fire to drag a goat out by the rope around its neck. The goat's ears are singed, its eyes wide, but it's alive. A woman crumples near the edge of the smoke, coughing so hard she drops her jar. You help her up. She's got soot in her hair, blood on her hands. She doesn't care. Her son is still somewhere inside the smoke. Suddenly a roar from the crowd, the largest of the burning huts begins to collapse, a wall crumbling inward with a noise like bones breaking. Everyone recoils, flames explode upward. A priest begins shouting a prayer, arms lifted toward the sky, but it's hard to tell if it's a plea or a command. And here's your fringe fact. While practical methods like water buckets were used to fight fires, ancient Egyptians also turned to ritual for protection. Specific spells and amulets were believed to ward off flames, and some homes had charms inscribed on the lintel to keep fire spirits away. One famous incantation involved invoking the cooling breath of Isis to smother the burning. You don't know any of those spells, so you stick with the water line. At some point someone hands you a damp cloth to wrap around your mouth and nose. You use it gratefully, the smoke stinging your lungs less with each breath. You can't see clearly, but you feel the change when the tide turns. The shouting softens. The flames stop growing. The wet earth around the last hut is finally doing its job. It's not out yet, but it's contained. When it's over, the quiet comes back like a slap. No one cheers, no one claps anyone on the back. Everyone's just tired, covered in ash, soaked in smoke and sweat. You look around at the people who were strangers a few days ago. They're still strangers, but you fought beside them, passed jars with them, held their children out of harm's way, and that means something. And here's your scholarly debate. How much community resilience existed at the local level in ancient Egypt? Some researchers argue that the state's central power made communities overly reliant on royal intervention. Others point to archaeological evidence of mutual aid, shared grain storage and cooperative labour that shows people banded together long before help could ever arrive. Tonight feels like confirmation of the latter. This wasn't the work of pharaohs or priests. This were people. Just people. You help carry one of the injured, a boy no older than 10, back toward the safer side of the village. His arm is burned, but not badly. His mother clutches him like a sacred relic. She doesn't speak, just looks at you with wide, tired eyes that say everything. You nod. She nods. Nothing more is needed. As the sun begins to edge back over the horizon, a strange calm settles across the ruins of what were once homes. People sit, breathe. Some start laying out bricks already, planning new walls before the smoke has even cleared. Others chant quiet prayers, their voices barely above whispers, offering thanks to gods they hope were listening. You sit among them, arms streaked with soot, back aching, eyes burning. You find a piece of burnt wood in the sand. You draw a line, then another. No symbols, no meaning, just motion, just recovery. Somewhere nearby a rooster crows. One of the unbothered goats kicks over an empty jar, and life somehow begins again. You're limping today. Not dramatically. No one's throwing you onto a stretcher and carrying you through the streets like a hero. But every step feels like a conversation between your muscles and the universe. And the universe, if we're being honest, is not being very supportive. Your arms ache from hauling water all night. Your lungs still feel like they've been scrubbed with sandpaper. And you have what might be the world's first sunburn and soot combo rash forming along your left shoulder. You're filthy. You're sore. You smell like desperation, but you're alive, and apparently that makes you a bit of a celebrity. As you hobble through the village in the weak morning light, people nod at you. A few even smile. One child offers you a half-mushed fig. You accept it like it's a gold medal. That's the kind of morning it is. The worst of the fire damage has been cleared already. The villagers, as if powered by divine caffeine, are rebuilding. Mud brick walls go up. Reed mats are woven. Ash is swept away with worn brooms. There's no weeping, no pity, just the quiet collective endurance. You see a man measuring timber by hand, his wife plastering a fresh wall with thick clay. The boy with the burned arm now has it wrapped in linen, and is back chasing goats like nothing happened. You walk slowly to the edge of the fields, where you've been told to meet someone. You're not sure who, just that it's time for your assignment. The term sounds ominous. You were kind of hoping to be left alone after yesterday's whole firefighting heroism thing, but no. You're still considered. Useful. At the field you meet a man named Hori. He looks like someone who's seen too much, slept too little, and doesn't have time for nonsense. He hands you a digging tool somewhere between a hoe and a pickaxe, and points at a long, shallow trench. "Dig," he says, and walks away. You sigh, and you dig. Here's your historical fact. Most people in ancient Egypt weren't pharaohs, priests, or pyramid architects. They were workers, farmers, fishers, potters, brickmakers, canal diggers, and all-purpose labourers. The survival of the entire civilization depended on their hands. Especially in the off-season when the Nile receded and fields were dry, communities shifted to state-run labour projects, repairing canals, building temples, maintaining flood barriers. Everyone owed labour in some form, as a kind of tax. If you weren't paying with grain, you were paying with sweat. The work is miserable, the sun is relentless, and the soil is less like dirt and more like compressed bricks made of hatred. You swing, scoop, and haul for what feels like hours, stopping only when someone hands you a jug of water that tastes faintly like copper and river moss. It's divine. You look around and realise you're not the only new guy on this crew. A few other recent arrivals, possibly seasonal labourers or people from fire-damaged homes, work beside you. Some make small talk in dialects you can't pass. Others grunt, dig, and focus entirely on not dying. You catch Hori watching from under the shade of a date palm. He's not judging, just taking inventory, as if to say, let's see what you're made of. And here's your fringe fact. Egyptian labour crews had supervisors known as overseers of 10, who monitored groups of workers and recorded their hours, outputs, and even bathroom breaks. On large state projects, workers were issued rations, usually bread, onions, garlic, and beer. The best crews earned extra oil or linen. The worst, public shame, beatings, or worse. Some graffiti found near tombs even mocked lazy workers. He who does not carry his load, may he be eaten by cats. After a midday meal, if you can call half a barley cake and a cup of warm beer a meal, you're told to assist with the oxen. You've never worked with an ox before. Turns out they're extremely uninterested in listening to people who don't know what they're doing. One of them, a massive beast with eyes like ancient judges, almost knocks you into a ditch when you tug its reins wrong. The local kids laugh, even the ox seems smug. By late afternoon you're covered in mud, sweat, and the crushing realization that you were not built for this. Not physically, not spiritually. The romantic idea of helping build civilization has worn off somewhere between your third back spasm and the moment your sandal got sucked off your foot by a puddle so deep it might qualify as a minor deity. But here's your scholarly debate. Were these labourers slaves, volunteers, or something in between? Pop culture often imagines a brutal regime of enslaved masses toiling under the whip, but the reality is more complex. Many were conscripted workers, farmers fulfilling their labour tax during the Nile's flood season when they couldn't tend crops. Others were paid artisans, skilled craftsmen who worked on tombs and temples in elite crews with housing, rations, and even time off. There was also slavery, yes, prisoners of war and debt-set slaves, but they made up a smaller percentage than people think. You finish your shift with exactly 0 dignity left. Your hands are blistered, your knees feel like glass, and you're pretty sure your spine just filed a formal complaint with Ra himself. But Hori walks over, squints at you, and gives a single approving grunt. It's not much, but it might be the highest praise this man has ever given anyone. He hands you a small wedge of roasted onion and half a date. You eat both with the reverence of a sacred offering. The sun sinks behind the palm trees, casting long shadows across the fields. Smoke from cooking fires curls into the air. The oxen are led back to their pens, the tools are stacked, and you somehow are still standing. You walk slowly back to your sleeping spot, body buzzing with exhaustion. The stars come out one by one, familiar now. You lie back on your mat, unsure if you'll ever move again. But you did it. You worked a full day in ancient Egypt. You dug, hauled, sweated, and didn't die. And for once, the gods seem impressed.